Mana System, Hello, World. By M.J. Markgrove. Chapter 51, Coming Undone. A few more weeks went by and I made sure to be the ideal slave. Even so, I could tell there was a change through the camp. It made me extremely paranoid. If I noticed, someone else was bound to notice soon. I wanted to warn Moana or any of my other contacts but I couldn't. Sheila was out on a patrol and Moana was working on some projects that I couldn't get access to. I only had one last option. I had mulled over the problem with freeing Jamal for a few days before I came up with a solution that seemed like it should work. I modified the last stamp I had to delay the rune activation for 8 hours. Give or take an hour. I checked my watch to see the time. It was close to 3 in the afternoon. By the time I made my way over to his cell, it should be close to 4. That would work. I fingered my ring as I walked. My newest armor was almost complete. I would finish it up before returning to the apartment. I had hoped for some more time to work on perfecting it, but this would have to do. I didn't have to worry about Charla needing me any time soon. The Triad was pushing again and she was in tactical meetings with her father. The dragons had suffered numerous losses in the last week. I had my doubts that all of the deaths were from the Triad. My suspicions tended towards some freed slaves getting revenge on their handlers. I kind of expected some of that, but not to this extent. The war gave these people plausible deniability. I made it to the building I tunneled into. Looking around, nobody was in sight. I slipped inside and to the basement. I had to push some material out of the way that I used to hide my work. There was no dirt or rock to clear away. Earth Fist was odd, it sort of compacted the rock and soil where I cast it. This worked in my favor as it shored up the tunnel walls. The spell wasn't really designed to be pushed into the ground, so my first attempts at the tunnel had been slow. Eventually, I got the hang of manipulating the spell. I checked the walls before stepping inside. Nothing had come loose or fallen since I was last here. Good. I crouch-walked as fast as I could up the tunnel. It wasn't a straight shot. As much as I had tried, I ended up having to go over, under or around obstacles I didn't want to disturb. The tunnel eventually ended at the brick wall. I listened with my ear pressed up against it for a few minutes but heard nothing. Here goes nothing. I shaped my earth fist to match one of the bricks and buelled it towards me. The brick deformed before popping out of the wall. I caught it before it crashed to the floor. The room on the other side was just as dark as my tunnel. PSST, I hissed, hoping the man would hear me. I heard some rustling below the brick I pulled and had to pull back as a grubby hand tried to grab me. Knock it off, I hissed angrily. The hand pulled back from the hole before I got a response. You here to taunt me with freedom again? Keep your voice down, they'll hear. Who cares, the man yelled. Someone pounded on the metal door, quiet in there. Blessedly the man was forced to comply with the order. I waited for a minute or two, which felt like an eternity with the unstable man on the other side of the wall, for the guard to go back to whatever they were doing. I brought you freedom, I said quietly, slipping the hammer and stamp into the hole. The man managed to lever himself up to stare directly at me. Since he was ordered to stay quiet, he couldn't ask his question. This stamp, I said, holding it up, will place another enchantment on your collar that will allow you to remove it. The man gave me a skeptical look until I showed him mine. Come closer and I will stamp your collar, just be aware this magic takes around 8 hours to work. I slipped off my watch and handed it to him. I could see a bit of light coming from under the door, it should be enough for him to see by. You won't be able to come out through this tunnel, you will have to escape on your own. I don't think that should be an issue for you. The tunnel would have been ideal for him to escape unnoticed, but I needed him to cause enough of a commotion to draw Abida over here. Good luck, I said as I closed up the brick again. It wouldn't look perfect, but it would be enough for the few hours it needed to be. I backed down the tunnel, using my spell to close off some sections. This was a slow process, taking me nearly half an hour before I was satisfied. Once free of the tunnel, I moved over to an old bench in the corner. It would have to do. I laid out all the rune-inscribed plates. These had been extremely complicated to make. I laid them all out in order. Each small plate made up a larger mosaic of the Tree of Life. Inset into the center of the design was the mana heart I acquired so long ago. I wished I had been able to test this design more thoroughly before crafting this armor, but there just wasn't enough time. I did use the last 5 scrap bits of metal I had to verify it should work, in theory. I had managed to talk Granik into setting the gem, it cost me my 5 cubic foot storage ring though. Since Moana had the other one, I was down to just my 7 cubic foot ring. It was fine. I could get more if I needed them after I escaped. The overall design was spectacular. Yggdrasil or the Tree of Life spread across all of the plates. The roots reaching down while the branches and leaves rose up, spreading across the chest. The back was similarly adorned. I even added runic circles to the tops of the rivet heads. Once complete they would blend into the overall pattern. All I had to do was attach the final 40 or so plates. I worked feverishly, taking care to set the rivets properly before hammering them into place. It took me quite some time to finish. Sweat dripped from my brow as I held up the finished armor. Unlike my previous 2 sets of armor, the plates on this one were exposed. A pale blue light seemed to emanate from the piece in the dark room. Only a few candles casting light enough to see. Magebane Brigandine. Quality, excellent. Armor, 32. Slashing resistance, 50%. Stabbing resistance, 65%. Blunt resistance, 15%. Magic resistance 90%. Elemental resistance 30%. Shield, max charge 200 mana. Made from mithril and wyvern, this armor has inherent magical and elemental resistance. The rune-crafted Tree of Life design combines all of the elements of the armor together, strengthening them. The mana heart set into the tree's roots provides a shield of force that deflects 0.5 damage per mana spent to charge it. Congratulations, you have created your first unique armor. Unique items are assigned names by the system to distinguish them from the rest. 5000 XP earned. Congratulations, you have made an item that is the first of its kind. Combining the lost art of rune crafting with a mana heart. 15,000 XP earned. I ran my hand over the armor, feeling the engraving. It was gorgeous. I slipped the armor on, adjusting the straps to get the proper fit. I walked over to an old mirror and took a gander at myself. The plates reflected the light just a bit. The wyvern hides underneath spilled out the bottom, covering down to my knees. Anything below my waist wasn't plated. It just wasn't practical with the funds I had. Despite that, the scaly texture and dark red of the wyvern hide looked imposing. There were no arms on this piece, but there were shoulder guards. I put my hand to the gem and willed my mana into it as Granik had told me to do. Unlike some enchantments, mine ran out of fuel. This meant I could make a stronger enchantment at the cost of having to refill it. I was only limited by the low level of mana heart I managed to find. The stone began to glow brightly as it absorbed my mana. I kept pumping mana into the stone until the whole room seemed to glow. After about 30 seconds the gem started to fade, but the tree seemed to come alive as the glow spread through the roots and branches, then among the leaves. This glow eventually faded too, and an imperceptible pulse like that of a beating heart flowed through the channels I carved. In the waning light of the room, the effect was barely noticeable. I removed the armor, placing it back in my ring. It wasn't yet time for that. I hurried out of the basement, exiting the building and heading back towards Charla's apartment. I was stopped by a commotion in an alley. I looked in to see 6 people fighting. It looked like it was 4 slaves vs 2 Black Dragon members. God damn it, why couldn't they wait? The Black Dragon members were trying to order the slaves to stand down, but of course, that wasn't working. They were boxed into the back of the alley, beset on all sides by the slaves. Still, they were managing to hold their own. I checked up and down the street. There were no other people in view as it was getting late. I pulled out my staff and double cast imbue on it. Molten rock started dripping from the staff as I ran into the alley. I cut down the 4 slaves in less than 10 seconds, with blink step. Whew, thanks, slave. But we could have handle. He was cut off as my blade cut through his neck like hot butter. As the swing came around to face his startled companion, I let out a concentrated stunning gust. A bolt of molten rock flew right into the man's face, cutting off his scream. The man desperately tried to pull the burning rock from his face as he collapsed on the ground. He died shortly after. It's your own damn fault, I said under my breath as I looted the corpses. I managed to acquire 2 more 1 cubic foot storage rings. I tucked them away in a hidden pocket. The rest, including the bodies, I stuffed into my ring. I would find some place to dispose of them before I returned. I walked out of the unassuming alley less than 2 minutes later. The only thing left was a few spots of blood. If those idiots had only waited a few hours, I could have let them live. I was too damn close to my revenge to let them ruin it all now. The rage inside was bubbling, it knew, soon it would be set free. I looked up to the fading light and took in a deep breath of the cool crisp air. Maybe it would snow tonight. Chapter 52, Pawn Takes Queen. I made it back to the apartment complex about an hour later. The sun was down, not even a glow left to tell the time by. I figured it was around 7. It was hard to tell in the colder months. I had one last task to perform before Charla returned. It wasn't easy finding the plans for this building. Eventually, I managed to come across a copy in a civil engineering building. The building had 4 main supports holding it up. I set to work rigging the 6 dwarven powder charges at the base of these posts. I covered up my work with Earth Fist. The timers were set to go off in around 4 hours. I ran up to Charla's apartment and hid the last 2 there. These weren't set yet, but I wanted them in place if I needed a distraction. Now, I only need to wait and hope she returned in a few hours. Otherwise, I would have to run downstairs and deactivate them again. Not something I was keen to attempt. I waited nervously as the minutes turned into hours. 8 rolled around, then 9, by 9:30 I was sweating bullets. I was about to go downstairs when I heard the door unlock. I breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from my brow. Charla opened the door to the apartment. She was exhausted from the all-day meeting. Going over the same tactics and plans over and over again. The only upside was the time she got to spend with her father. She saw Paul standing in his usual spot. Her desire to hurt him flared for a moment before it went out. She was too tired for that tonight. She just dropped her clothing and armor as she walked. Perhaps the view would entice her slave. She smiled cruelly at the thought of rutting with the man. Instead, she just ordered him to his room but told him he must sleep on the floor. That gave her a little bit of juice as she headed to her room. I watched Charla strip as she headed to her room, my eyes not leaving her form. There wasn't so much as a twitch of attraction as I watched her, just a cold calculating look. I headed to my room to wait. She would be asleep soon. I stared out my window until the clock in the main room struck 10. I was in luck. Across the compound I saw a bright orange glow. It came from the direction that Jamal should be in. I schooled any smile before it crossed my lips. It was time to get to work. I quietly made my way to the other charges I hid in the apartment, setting their timers for an hour. Then I donned my new armor. I left off my leather gloves. I wanted to feel this. I approached Charla's room. The door was left open. I stood outside, listening to her rhythmic breathing. Slowly I pushed the door open and went inside. She was fast asleep on her king-sized 4-post bed. I stood next to the bed glaring at the source of my months of torment and Fiona's death. Even if the system didn't recognize the fact that she ordered the kill, I knew. I was going to savor this. I jumped on top of the woman and clamped my hand around her neck as she startled awake. I could have simply killed her with my staff, but I needed her to feel some of what I felt over the past few months. "Pow Paul, stop," she forced out as I choked her. When I didn't stop immediately, her eyes went wide. She knew something was wrong. She hit me with a lightning bolt. My armor reduced the damage to 40 and the shield absorbed the rest. When that didn't stop me, she started to panic, hitting me with other spells. I didn't care. I had let my rage out. All sounds seemed to be muted and everything had gone red. She finally got through my shield, but the spell damage was laughable with my resistance. I just squeezed harder as she tried to burn me alive with a flame spell. She lost control of it halfway through, setting the bed on fire. She tried to pry my hands from her neck, but her strength wasn't sufficient. Then she took to hitting me in the face. The blows hurt as there was nothing to absorb the damage. I didn't care, I just tightened my grip some more as she started to turn blue. Her strikes became weaker and I idly noticed she pressed her thumb to a ring on her finger. There was a flash that momentarily blinded me, but I held on. I was pushing her down with all my weight. Her flailing arms finally stilling after several minutes. Still, I held on. I wanted to see it, I needed to make sure. "Lethal damage, you have killed Charla Cotton." I laughed and laughed. I couldn't control myself. I started punching the dead woman in the face. "No!" I screamed. I wanted her to suffer longer, she needed to make up for the suffering she put me through. Eventually, I managed to get the rage back under control. I also looked at the messages I received. "You have reached level 14, modifiers increased by 1, 2 free skill slots available. Error, unclassified resource utilized. Defining resource. Resource defined, aura. Skill assigned, Aura of Rage, 1 free skill slot utilized for new skill. Aura of Rage, once per day you can cast an Aura of Rage. Aura covers 20m, anyone caught inside the aura will feel fear. Only those with higher endurance than you can resist the fear. You temporarily gain 1 point in all of your attributes for each individual affected by your aura while it is active. Cost 10 HP/SEC, cooldown 1 day. There are many types of auras, yours has been colored by hate and anger. I felt like I got punched in the gut as the system ripped away one of my skill points to create this new ability, one that I didn't want. I got to my feet, deciding to finally see what Charla had been playing with on her hand. Emergency signal ring. Yeah, I thought as much. I took the rest of her gear to sort through later and headed to the roof. As I stood at the corner of the roof, I could hear shouting coming from below. It wasn't close enough for me to make out, but I had a good guess. I smiled wistfully. I did it, Fiona, I avenged your death. I felt the building shake a bit and I smiled again. I guess her father found the body. It wouldn't be long now. I turned to face the door. Less than 20 seconds later the door burst open, being torn from its hinges by the force of the attack. An irate Mr. Cotton stepped out, followed by Abida. What have you done? The man screamed at me as he stalked forward. What you should have done years ago, but you are a spineless coward who can't even control his own daughter. The man screamed and tried to rush at me, but Abida held him back. Damn, I had hoped to take the father with me, but that damn Abida was too level-headed. Abida said something to Charla's father, causing him to step back. I activated Area of Denial just in time. There was a loud crack and a boom. Whatever spell Abida had, it bypassed my Area of Denial. The crack came from my amulet as it broke to absorb the blow. Then our spells interacted oddly. We were both flung from the roof of the building at high speed. I only knew this because I got to watch Abida's body slam into and through the building next door before I too flew through a building. My spell absorbed the blow as I crashed through that building and halfway through the next one. I sat up, still sore from the impact of Abida's attack. I managed to stand and walk to the hole I made. There were still 10 seconds on my spell, so I just jumped down from the 8th floor. Shortly after landing, I heard 2 explosions. This was followed less than a minute later by 4 more. Either I had timed them correctly, which seemed unlikely, or the others were set off from the initial explosion. Dust and debris rolled past the street I was on and I heard a creaking groan as the building started to come down. I needed to get out of the area fast. I got about a block before someone stopped me. Where do you think you're going, Paul? I turned to see William Conrad standing there with Gus and the branches. I don't have time for your shit, William, just leave. Fuck you, slave. On your knees. I sighed, and William smiled. He lost that smile when I pulled the collar off and tossed it into the street. I pulled out my staff. Kill him. Conrad screamed as he tried to back away. It was already too late. I cast Godly Might, Flurry, Aura Strike, and Blink Step in rapid succession. I easily wove past the branches, idly noting that Gus hadn't moved. William managed to get his spear up to block my first strike, but my overwhelming strength flung the spear wide, causing the man to stumble backward. I had given the man a chance and he chose to ignore it. My eyes followed the tip of my staff as the bladed end sliced into William's armor. The man's eyes went wide. He tried to retaliate, but he was already dead, he just didn't know it. My staff punching into him 14 more times. The spear dropped from his lifeless hand as his body shuddered and slid off the blade. I flicked the blood from my staff and turned on the other 2 that were attacking. I used Banshee's Wail on them. As they were stunned, I followed up with a blow to their heads to keep them out. Last I turned to Gus. The man was holding something in his hand. Turns out it was a broken slave collar, his broken slave collar in fact. One last act of kindness, I told myself as I carved the runes to release the collars. These didn't have to be as fancy as the ones I made earlier, so it didn't take me long to finish. I removed those collars and stored them in my ring. No point leaving them lying around for others to inspect. Gus didn't say a word, he was still stunned by his own collar coming off. I was curious about it as well, but not enough to stay around. I pulled out Bella and took off. Right now I needed speed. Chaos was erupting all around as fights between freed slaves, still captured slaves, and Black Dragon members broke out. Bella was hit a few times, as was I, by spells and projectiles. I urged Bella on as I healed us both. Soon the wall came into view and I could see men at the top, yelling for us to stop. Instead, I hit the gate with Earth Fist. The weak structure gave way, allowing us to dash under the guards before they could stop us. I chose this guard point for a reason. I knew the two on watch were melee fighters. I kept riding until the Chicago skyline, or what was left of it anyway, was well behind me. I moved Bella down some residential streets until I felt it was safe enough to look for a place to spend the night. This wasn't exactly the good part of town. All the homes and small businesses had barred windows and doors. I found a place, tucked behind an alley that looked promising. After securing the door, I found a place to lay down and rest. I left Bella out in the house. She would warn me if anyone came to visit. Then I passed out. Chapter 53, Afterglow. I startled awake as a boom echoed across the city. It was morning, but I could still hear the occasional fighting in the distance. Bella was laying down on the other side of the room, looking at me. I stood and stretched my sore muscles. I had to stop as my side gave me a twitch. I reached down to feel the spot Abida had hit me. My new armor was dented in, and my armor was not providing nearly as much in the way of protection as it should. The gem still held a charge, but the power could no longer flow along the runic pattern to provide the shield. I carefully removed the armor to inspect the damage. There was a fist-shaped imprint in the lower right by the rib cage. 3 plates were cracked. How the man had managed to crack mithril with a punch, through multiple barriers and a damage ward, was beyond me. I checked the armor's stats to see how bad it was. Magebane Brigandine. Quality, fair, damaged. Armor, 25. Slashing resistance, 50%. Stabbing resistance, 65%. Blunt resistance, 15%. Magic resistance 25%. Elemental resistance 15%. I sighed after seeing the status of the armor. With the damage, it wasn't much better than the Tribar armor I made. And in some cases, it was worse. I decided to store it in my ring for now and switch to my other armor. I also took this time to look at my notifications. And there were a lot of them. In total, I had 46 kills. A few of the names I recognized as slaves, but no sign of Abida or Mr. Cotton. Damn it. I did get another notice though. Congratulations, you are the first person on your planet to deal over 100,000 damage with one attack, 150,000 XP awarded. It all added up for enough to bring me to level 15. I looked at my stats before I decided on where I wanted to put my new attribute points. Paul Fuller Mantra Enchanter level 15. Strength, 12, plus 2, modifier x16. Endurance, 16 modifier x34. Agility, 15, plus 2, modifier x16. Perception, 15 modifier x16. Intelligence, 19 modifier x34. Wisdom, 14 modifier x16. Charisma, 11 modifier x16. Luck, 14 modifier x16. HP, 544, 598. Mana, 646. Mana Rigon, M224. I was starting to see a need to bump endurance up again. At this level, one spell or attack was devastating. It was no wonder Abida was so damn powerful. Even though he survived, I doubt he or Mr. Cotton made it out unscathed. I knew Abida had lost his arm. I saw the limb fly off when he impacted the building as I was falling. I didn't see a real big need to bump up wisdom. I was getting almost 4 mana a second back right now. Maybe at level 20, I would increase that stat. The same held true for charisma and luck. I didn't see any point in spending points in those stats right now. I sure as hell didn't care if people like me anymore. And my luck seemed to be worse if anything. This left me with strength, endurance, agility, perception, and intelligence. I could dump a point in each, but I wasn't sure that was the right road to take. I still had my buffs for strength and agility to raise their stats. So that left the other 3. I seemed to gain the most by increasing my magical damage and mana. Mostly mana, since only 2 of my abilities improved from an intelligence increase, Earth Fist, and Healing Touch. I placed the points, or I tried to. There was some sort of wall at 20 points preventing me from adding any more. There must be a way to overcome this limitation? There was no way Abida or Mr. Cotton had less than 20 points in strength or dexterity. I would have to talk with someone about this issue later. In the meantime, I added the last point into a different stat. Paul Fuller Mantra Enchanter level 15. Strength, 13, plus 2, modifier x16. Endurance, 18 modifier x34. Agility, 15, plus 2, modifier x16. Perception, 16 modifier x16. Intelligence, 20 modifier x34. Wisdom, 14 modifier x16. Charisma, 11 modifier x16. Luck, 14 modifier x16. HP, 612, 673. Mana, 680. Mana Rigan, M224. It would do, for now, the extra mana and health would be important. I couldn't leave this area until I killed those two, or at least verified they were dead. I would also make sure to kill any black dragon stragglers that I came across. I owed it to them to see that they would never rise to prominence again. I looked at my available skills. I had 3 points to spend. Level 14 didn't give me any buffs to my already existing spells. I had kind of expected it to, but maybe those spells had already reached their maximum. Instead, I was given 2 options. Disruption, causes a wave of rock that shoots from the ground in an arc in front of you, causing weapon damage. 30% chance of disrupting any active ability of target's hit. Max range 10m, max width 8m, cost 100 mana, cooldown 10 minutes. Syncopate, your strike has a 20% chance to stop the target's heart. Each point of endurance above yours reduces this chance, cost 60 mana, cooldown 5 minutes. Syncopate sounded nice until you read the second part. I didn't think it was worthwhile for a possibly less than 20% chance of it working. I took disruption instead. The fact that it said it causes weapon damage meant it would incorporate my elemental imbuement as well. Level 15 didn't buff any of my existing abilities either. Shroud, a misty veil covers an area 10 cubic meters extent and lasts for 10 minutes, obscuring all vision, cost 80 mana, cooldown 2 hours. Calcifying strike, your attack slowly converts the target into stone. Spreads 2 square centimeters extent per sec until cleansed. Lasts 5 minutes, cost 50 mana, cooldown 5 minutes. Air blade, produces a sharp blade of air that can cut through most armor, causing weapon damage. Cost 45 mana, cooldown 2 minutes. As much as I would like another ranged attack, especially one that would improve with imbue, I decided to go with Shroud and Calcifying Strike. Shroud would give me something I have been sorely lacking, a way to escape a fight. Calcifying Strike sounded like a good way to disable an opponent or kill them, depending on how the ability worked. I did some quick math. It wasn't enough to cover an entire person, let alone turn an entire human into stone. I would have to test it and make sure to target important body parts. I packed up my gear and Bella. It would be easier to exit the house with her in storage. I buffed myself and headed out the back door. Halfway down the back steps, I heard clapping. I whipped around, staff appearing in my hand. Lounging on the roof over the porch was a man in black. Wait, I recognized this man. It was the one who killed Gregorio. The clapping faded as the man replied, "That was quite the party you threw for us last night, congratulations are in order. You can relax, if I wanted you dead I would have killed you while you slept. Cute pet by the way." The man disappeared into a puff of smoke, reappearing on the ground. I still kept my staff ready. "Fine, whatever. I just came to let you know the work isn't done." Somehow the surviving members managed to fight off the freed slaves. We also believe that Harold, you might know him as Mr. Cotton, and his right-hand man Abida survived. It wasn't without injury though. We need to push the remaining forces before they can recover their strength. I did my part, why should I help you? The man laughed, "Yet, like you weren't going to go back in to finish the job. You're an open book kid. Besides, wouldn't Fiona want you to finish seeing this through?" I lunged at the man but he turned into smoke. "Don't you dare bring her up, you know nothing." I growled. The man appeared again a few feet back, touchy, touchy. "Fine, I won't mention your old flame. Just thought you might like some assistance with the cleanup. Mutual self-interest and all that. So, you in or not?" The man was an ass, but he had a point. I decided to scan him, to see what I was dealing with. Jacob Moore, Shade Scout level 13. The man lifted his eyebrow as I scanned him but didn't say anything. I didn't know these people or trust them. Hell, I didn't trust anyone anymore. Still, his plan had merit. I could use some backup. It just galled me that this man seemed to know everything that was going on but their group only did hit and run tactics. It seemed to me that they could easily get in and out of the compound while killing off high-level members. A few might pose an issue for them. Abida especially. I had a feeling if that man ever got free he would hunt me to the ends of the earth, just on principle. Did all the slaves die in the fighting? No, most just ran at the first sign of trouble. It's probably the reason the rest fell in the fighting. They took a good number with them though. So most did what I did and got the hell out as fast as they could. Can't say I blamed them for that. Fine, where do we start? That's the easy part. We will dispatch any patrols, killing off any members, while you go in and do whatever it is you did to free the slaves. Then rinse and repeat. Eventually, they won't have enough members or slaves to send out. Okay, and when should we start? Now works for me. The man pulled his bow and shot a glowing arrow right past my head. The wet splat I heard made me whip around. A man appeared as he stumbled backward, an arrow jutting from his eye and a surprised look on his face. He reached up to try and pull the arrow out, but he was already dead. I recognized the man as one of Charla's assassins. His body collapsed to the ground, his blade bouncing away as it hit the sidewalk. Well, that was quick of them. I thought it would take another 20 minutes for them to pick up your trail. I glared at the cavalier man as he strode past and pulled the now inert arrow from the man's skull. No point letting a good arrow go to waste, he said, waving it in the air. He flicked the blood off of it and returned it to his storage ring. Shall we go? Or would you like to stick around and play with the others that are likely closing in? The man didn't wait for my response. He started walking down the alley, either I followed him or I didn't. I ground my teeth but chose to follow him. I also put my talisman of Shuma on. It may have limited uses but I wanted something to see through cloaking and illusions if I came across others like the assassin. Which seemed likely at this point. These assassins attacking me also told me something important. If Abida or Harold Cotton were in any condition to come after me, they would have themselves. They had healers, so this meant the loss of at least one limb. Even with healing, these took days or weeks to grow back unless you had the original to reattach. This might be my only chance to eliminate the threat unless I found a way to level at least 5 more times in 2 days. This seemed unlikely, considering I dropped a building on almost 50 people and only gained a level and a half. Chapter 54, Surrounded by Darkness. I followed Jacob along a winding path deeper into the city. Most of the main downtown had been reduced to rubble in the early fighting. The skyscrapers still stood but they sported numerous signs of battle. Windows blasted out, melted exteriors, even bullet holes. Any transported individuals didn't survive long in the fighting. Now the downtown center was the domain of monsters, or so I heard. Someone said they spotted a dragon roosting on top of the Sears Tower. Not sure I quite believed that. I wasn't about to go there myself to confirm or deny the allegations. Jacob finally stopped at a blank metal door below an overpass. He knocked 3 times, waited a few seconds, and knocked 2 more times. The door opened from the inside. There was no handle on the outside, not like that would stop anyone with magic or ability from just destroying the door. I followed Jacob inside. I didn't see anyone else. I decided to activate my talisman. A form seemed to waver into being next to Jacob. I decided to scan him as well. Destin Malone, Shroud Hunter level 8. The kid didn't look older than 15. A wickedly curved blade was strapped to his waist and the kid wore it easily. I made a note not to underestimate young people. They could be just as strong as adults now. I followed the two silently for another 10 minutes. The tunnel getting darker and darker as we went. We popped out into a subway tunnel. No light penetrated the gloomy darkness, so I assumed either one or both ends of the above-ground portion had been caved in. I was debating on whether or not to use another one of my talisman's uses when I heard a voice. I see you have brought a friend, Jacob. Care to explain? I looked towards a dark silhouette near the wall. The woman wasn't cloaked or hidden, I had just missed her because the room was so dark. Apologies, Leader Stone, this is the man our contacts told us about, he said, waving towards me. Oh really, she said, stepping away from the wall to get a closer look. I couldn't make out her features clearly, with the lack of light. It was a miracle I could see anything at all. I chalked it up to my higher perception. So, you're the man that found a way to free the slaves? You don't look like much. How did you do it? I shrugged, I only got the ball rolling, others implemented my plan for me. Perhaps you should ask them how they did it. I saw her lips curl into a smile. Oh, we have, at least a few that we managed to save before the dragons killed them or they fled the area. I was more curious about this. She pulled out one of the stamps I had given out. Somehow I don't think this item is a short hammer, or was it a meat tenderizer? No, I remember now, it was a device to pleasure oneself with. Yes, I liked that description the best. God, I really wish there was a way to control that Odin rune to some extent. If it gave the same description every time, it would be much more useful. I added that to my to-do list. I shrugged at the stone woman's question. Beats me, could be anything. A pity then, she said, I guess you won't mind if I keep it. No, good, she added, without waiting for my reply. The item disappeared into a ring. I didn't care if she kept the item, perhaps she wanted to gauge my reaction. Sorry to disappoint, lady. Eventually, they might be able to figure the item out. It wasn't like I expected to keep my craft a secret forever. It didn't mean I had to tell them about it though. If she was stymied or surprised by my lack of reaction, she didn't show it. She just carried on as if nothing had happened. Well, what should I call you? Paul, or Mr. Fuller? I wasn't too surprised that she was able to identify me. I decided to try the same with her. Stone hidden. She gave a soft chuckle at my attempt. A woman must have some secrets, Mr. Fuller. I guess she wouldn't make a good leader of a shadowy organization if any Tom, Dick, and Harry were able to use identify on her. Just call me Paul. Very well, Paul. I assume Jacob here has recruited you to help us. I guess she was technically correct. Yes, I replied flatly. Not one to mince words, I can respect that. Has Jacob discussed our plans for the remaining sect members? Yes, your teams kill off the members outside while I secure the release of the prisoners. What happens if they don't want freedom? It was her turn to shrug. Can't save everyone, Paul. It was a cold, clinical calculation. One I already knew to be true, I just wanted to gauge their reaction. I wasn't about to risk my life freeing someone, just to have them turn on me for doing so. What was one more death on my conscience at this point? How will I coordinate with your teams? They will find you and provide you the intel needed to be successful in our endeavor, she said as she faded from view. I guess our meeting was over. Come, Paul, Jacob said, motioning me to follow. I took one last look at the empty train platform as we walked back the way we came. It was hard to put any amount of trust in a group that always remained in the shadows. At least with the other groups, I knew who and what I was dealing with. Leader Stone watched the newcomer leave. She pulled out the odd item and inspected it again. It came back as something different, as it always did. She would have loved to know how he performed that little trick. She already knew what the item was. It was a stamp of some sort. Their contact at the gate had turned it over, explaining what it did. She had her doubts until they had managed to capture a patrol group to test it on. She still remembered the glowing symbols, before the magic hid them from view. Of course, she recognized the design. She had a friend that had gotten a similar tattoo when she was younger. She didn't know what they had to do with magic though. She knew about enchantments. She even had an enchanted dagger. The design on that was completely different than the designs Paul utilized. She even tried to have a few people duplicate the design. None of them had been successful at getting them to do anything. It did, however, give her a full layout of the design he used. One that didn't fade away after a small amount of time. A team had been sent to retrieve some books. Unfortunately, those didn't help explain what the combination of runes did. She couldn't even find one of the runes listed at all. It would have been so much simpler if Paul had just told them. Instead, he chose to be standoffish. She wasn't surprised. She had the reports of what the Black Queen had done to him. She was surprised the man had managed to remain sane. She might be wrong on that assumption though. Who blows up a building while standing at the top? I found myself huddled on the third floor of a building. It was late in the day and patrols were starting to return. These were long-range patrols and would be unaware of the events that transpired over the last few days unless they carried the bound books. Jacob popped in 15 feet away, startling me. On reflex, my staff was already in my hand. Relax, I just came to let you know the group should be passing by in about 3 minutes. I glared at the man before nodding in acknowledgement. He watched in curiosity as I produced a dragon armband. You didn't think I was going to just go out and subdue them all, did you? I can weed out the followers faster this way. It looked like the man wanted to say something, but chose to hold his tongue. I activated my buffs as I made my way to the first floor. The thick walls would help block the sound of my chanting. After I got to the ground floor, I hid off to the side of the broken-out storefront. A few seconds went by before I started to hear the crunch of footsteps approaching. There was a shout of alarm followed by a flurry of activity. This was followed by some grumbling and complaining. I chose this time to make myself known. "Halt!" I said, stepping out of the store. The 5 slaves froze. No, that wasn't right. 4 of the 5 froze, and I gave the 5th a raised eyebrow. "Well, looks like I only need to free 4 today. You might as well take your collar off, the revolt already happened." The man looked at me and then at his team in uncertainty. He took a few steps back as they watched him. He reached up and slid the collar off, tossing it to the ground. Then he bolted. I let him go, no point chasing the man. I turned my attention back to the 4 remaining slaves. So, who would try to harm me if I freed them? I cleaned the blood off of my staff. 2 of the 4 had sworn to destroy me if they got the opportunity. The remaining 2 had seemed relieved when I cut the others down. I could only imagine what nasty deeds they had performed. I used my newest stamp to free the last 2, storing the collars. By this time someone from the Shadow faction had turned up to lead them supposedly to safety. We repeated this process for 3 other groups that day. I only had to kill 2 more people during that time. One had managed to lie during my questioning. He managed to stab me twice before I used calcifying strike on his face. My armor blunted his blows, saving me from a fatal strike just barely. The result of my attack was pretty startling. The calcification spread across his head in less than 3 seconds, thanks to my high intelligence score. The spell appeared to affect surface tissues first. The man screamed and tried to pull the affected tissues off. Well, he succeeded in doing that. Chunks of skin broke free as he clawed at his face. One of the other slaves vomited after seeing this. Couldn't say I blamed them, it was pretty horrific. After about 20 seconds the guy's upper body was encased, including his arms. He was still alive though. I could have healed him, or cleansed my spell, but why bother? I freed the man from a life of enslavement and he turned around and stabbed me. Instead, I decided to test something. The other slaves had run off or were scooped up by the Shadow faction by this point. I activated Earth Fist, but I didn't aim my spell for the ground. Instead, I used the calcified skin as my target. I pictured what I wanted the spell to do. I heard a crunch as the man's body was crushed like a tube of toothpaste. I stepped back to avoid the fountain of gore that spurted out the top. Safe to say my test worked. I needed to play around with metamagic and some of my other skills more later. I think I should be okay as long as I stayed away from my buffs and heals. With that nasty bit of business out of the way, I pondered my mistake. I would have to be more careful with my questioning going forward. I would have to revive the tactic I used when first recruiting people for the revolt. I hadn't done it before because I thought it would have been clear if someone wanted to be free or not. I guess I was just being naive again. This whole process would go much faster if I just killed them all and moved on. I don't know why I was even contemplating that as a possibility. Sure, I would have to kill some people, but others were still decent. Well, as decent as someone could be after being forced to be a slave soldier for months on end. I decided to just see how things played out. If the ratios started to change too much, I would just change my plan of attack. Time was ticking away and I needed to confront the leaders before they recovered. I didn't have time to play nanny or be everyone's friend. There was likely a good reason the remaining slaves were still collared and not freed by the agents I set loose. I pondered this while I headed to my next ambush location. Chapter 55, Remnants. I could see the gate up the block, at least 5 people were patrolling it. Ahem. I spun around to face the voice. Jacob stood there with a smirk on his face. One of these times I'm just going to stab you and I'm not going to feel bad about it one bit. Probably, but that time isn't now. Just, tell me what you want. The man rolled his eyes. You're no fun. I just came to let you know we can't take the gate. What do you mean you can't take it? Just like I said. I pinched the bridge of my nose and sighed, why can't you take it? Too many guards and at least 2 have detection auras going. Are they all sect members? Jacob leaned out past the building to look before shrugging. Well, he was no help here. I looked at the surrounding buildings. Fine. I'll do it my way. I pushed past the man and circled to the building on the opposite side of the street that the gate was set on. I climbed the building stairs to the roof. This was only a 5-story building, so it didn't take very long. It was time for human meteorite again. I readied myself by double imbuing my staff with earth and fire elements. This combination worked spectacularly this way. I tested my run up, trying to judge the distance correctly. The spell I wanted to use for this stunt had a shorter range. I decided to add impact to my staff as well. The staff vibrated with the power of 3 spells, but it held. That made me remember, I still had to get around to rune crafting my weapon. I took a deep breath and sprinted, activating blink step. My surroundings blurred as I zoomed across the roof. Just before the edge of the wall, I cast Area of Denial. I didn't even bother jumping over the short wall at the end of the roof. With my spell active, I just barreled through. The noise and falling debris caused all the guards to look up. Some screamed as they recognized me. A few spells and projectiles flew my way, bouncing harmlessly off my shield. I realized I overshot the position I wanted to land. I tried to redirect my impact point even as the sect members jumped from the wall to avoid my strike. Others were attempting to run away from the wall. It was too late for those people. I slammed into the bottom of the wall, tearing through it just before my staff struck the ground, activating disruption. Have you ever seen a volcano explode while standing on the rim? Yeah, that's what it looked like. The ground in front of me exploded into the air as it was superheated. The few poor saps that were caught in the range of my spell screamed as they sunk into the molten asphalt. The molten material that was ejected from my attack fell across the street and into buildings. Another fleeing man was struck by one of the falling globs. He screamed and rolled around on the ground trying to dislodge the material. Meanwhile, the 3 that had jumped from the wall were running away. I quickly stepped out of the small crater I made, the molten rock sliding from my barrier. I decided to run after the trio of fleeing men as opposed to the single man. I wasn't about to let them escape my wrath. Duncan ran as fast as his twisted ankle would allow him. He was aware of the rumors about the Black Queen's pet, Paul, and he wanted nothing to do with it. That's why he jumped off the wall instead of retreating inside. He was only level 8 for God's sake. He looked back and saw the devastation, then he saw the man's eyes. They were soulless and without mercy. He found an extra gear and ran a bit faster. He heard the man next to him scream as he looked backward. They both threw spells and projectiles at the deranged man, trying to slow him down. It didn't matter. The man didn't even attempt to dodge or block the attacks. He just continued to chase them and was quickly catching up. Duncan tried to plead with the man. It was no use, he would have been better off bargaining with the devil himself. The last thing Duncan saw was a white-hot blade piercing his chest. I finished off the last man. The idiot thought he could plead for his life. They chose their fate when they joined the Black Dragon sect and there would be no mercy. Scum like him didn't deserve to live. I looked down the street where the last man had run off to. Jacob sat there, waving at me. At least he didn't let the man get away, I thought. I stripped the bodies of anything useful and headed back to the obliterated gate. The area I turned molten was starting to cool. You could hear the hisses and pops as the area around it tried to adjust for the massive increase in temperature. The part I found most telling was the lack of any reinforcements. Usually, there were at least 10 people stationed near a gate, in case they needed backup. They should have been here by now. I smiled. This meant the Black Dragon was low on trusted members. Jacob strolled up as I watched the cooling street. Bit overkill, don't you think? No, I replied simply. Jacob shrugged and disappeared in a puff of smoke. I walked through the wreckage of the gate, making sure to avoid the liquefied area. I stabbed the last survivor in the back as I passed. He had passed out from the pain. It was time to hunt the head dragon. The streets were mostly vacant as I made my way farther into their territory. The cold was keeping most people inside, it seemed, or more had fled than I was led to believe. It worked for me. With my hoodie pulled up, my staff put away, and the armband clearly visible on my sleeve, nobody gave me a second glance. I guess the racket I made at the gate hadn't traveled this far. Occasionally I would hear an aborted cry from an alley as I passed. Jacob and his men were doing their job. I stopped a block and a half from the building Harold Cotton used as his headquarters. It looked like at least 14 people guarded the entrance. One man stood out, his red and yellow accented robe blowing in the wind. His gaze fixed squarely on mine. Abida, I growled. The man was down one arm but otherwise seemed to be healed. He walked towards me at an unhurried pace, the rest of the sect members left to guard the building. It seems they didn't trust slaves to help guard anymore, other than Abida. I smiled at that. I produced my staff, imbuing it with ice and lightning. I didn't utilize the ice element very often, but it came in handy to slow opponents down as it caused frost damage. The lightning sparked inside the ice as it coated the ends of my staff. Abida stopped half a block away. Too far for me to blink step to him. I got into a combat stance as the face-off began. Then I heard him talk, which was rare. Are you satisfied with the damage you have wrought? The lives you have taken? The lives that you will cause to suffer going forward? Was this guy for real? Of course, I was. Then I noticed something. Abida wasn't wearing a collar anymore. My eyes narrowed at this revelation. Nobody would have been stupid enough to give this man the keys to his collar. Did you enjoy pretending to be a slave? I replied back. The man's face was stone, except for the faintest hint of a smile that faded almost as fast as it formed. That helped explain some of the inconsistencies I had noticed. His extremely high dual-class level, his ability to place his hands on his master on the roof. He had been a trump card for Harold. But, why? What did he get out of the arrangement? We continued to stare at each other as 4 men dragged 2 people out from alleys to the side. I recognized them. It was Moana and Sheila. It looks like they had been beaten pretty thoroughly. It wasn't too hard for us to figure out it was these 2 that started your little rebellion. Perhaps you will sacrifice your life for theirs? I hear it's what you like to do. The man was trying to get a rise out of me, the anger stirred, but with my skill I had more control over it now. No? Pity. Abida strode over to the captive women and grabbed Sheila by the neck with his remaining arm. He cocked his arm back and forcefully threw Sheila face first into the building. There was a wet smack as her head exploded on contact with the wall. Moana screamed and tried to struggle free, looking at me, her eyes pleading for me to help. I couldn't help even if I wanted to. I would be lucky enough to win this fight on my terms. Abida calmly walked back over to Moana and tore her throat out with his bare hand, tossing the bloody lump of flesh to the ground as she gasped and choked on her own blood. I fought down the urge to vomit. I wouldn't give this man the satisfaction. Abida faced me again and the other 4 walked off, leaving the dead bodies in the street as a sign of their disdain. 2 cockroaches dealt with, 1 more to go, he said as he stalked towards me. I was as ready as I could be. As he closed the distance he started sprinting. Then he screamed and his whole body blurred and stretched, leaving after images, like still frames in the air behind him. I got my area of denial up just in time as he slammed into the dome. It cost me almost my entire mana pool to cast it using multicast, but it was worth it. The impact shattered the street and every window within 50 feet. Hell, even I staggered back a step as the dome, an invisible magical construct, now sported a clearly visible crack. I counterattacked using Blink Step, adding Aura Strike to my weapon as I stabbed forward. This left me with only about 40 mana. He slapped my staff away with a contemptuous swipe of his hand. The force was enough to deform the blade at the end. He did take a bit of damage from the elemental effects. I could see his muscles tense up and ice frosted his hand. This didn't seem to slow the monk/juggernaut down much as he performed a sweeping roundhouse kick to my shield. Again the air rang from the powerful blow, my shield cracking yet again. I stepped back to avoid another follow-up kick and let loose with Banshee's wail. He staggered backward but was not stunned by the attack. I realized his class must give him some resistance towards stuns. I used 2 of my mana injectors, bringing my mana back up to 300, and I hit him with another Banshee's wail. He staggered again, this time with a surprised look on his face. That look didn't last long. He clenched his fist and punched the air towards me. Literally, he punched a wall of air towards me. My shield groaned in protest as the compressed air slammed against it, adding another crack. I pulled out and injected 2 more mana injectors to top off my mana. I struck out at the man again with my staff. He ducked under the attack and reached out to grab my staff. I let him grab it and quickly pulled out my backup staff. My shield forced the old staff out at high speed, wrenching him off balance long enough for me to hit him with a calcifying strike on his leg. Enraged by my ploy, he used my own staff against my shield. The staff impacted my shield and cracked in half from the force. My shield crumbled under the blow and fell to the ground with the sound of broken glass. I retreated backward as he whipped the remaining portion of the staff at my head. It barely missed. His aim must have been affected by the slowing effect of the ice and calcification. He glared daggers at me as heat poured from his body. The ice and surprisingly the calcification melted away. Time to die, bug. I always knew it would come down to this. I cast Aura of Rage, followed by Regenerating Rain, Rejuvenate, Protection, Godly Might, and Blink Step, using multicast. This left me with 70 mana. The world turned red and pulsed in time with the beat of my heart. I could see Abida's steps falter for just a moment as the effect of my aura slammed into him. I was losing health even with both my healing effects active, so I had to make this fast. I blurred towards the man and slammed my staff down with an overhead strike. Abida barely managed to avoid my blow, countering with another kick. I ducked under it, slashing at his leg as it passed by. I managed to score a grazing cut as the man pivoted like a damn cat to avoid most of the damage. His hand snaked out like a viper and grabbed my staff. He used this leverage to force my staff to the ground, bending the blade as he somersaulted over me. He managed to kick me in the shoulder as he flipped by, leaving my arm numb and taking 84 health off of me. I stumbled away to try and recover. He wasn't having any of that. He came at me with a swift punch, followed by a twin roundhouse. I avoided the punch and the first kick. The second sent me flying backward. I scrambled to my feet and used a health injector. That attack had shaved over 200 health off, even with my armor absorbing a significant portion of the attack. I ran forward and thrust my weapon towards the man. He tried to grab my staff again, but I was able to reverse my strike, cracking him in the side with the blunt end of my staff. He staggered to the side with a hiss of pain. Blink Step ended then, causing me to stagger. It was all the opening the man needed as his hand lashed out and grabbed my throat in a vice-like grip. I tried to swipe at him, but he headbutted me, causing my vision to swim. My aura of rage fizzled out as I lost concentration. Abida kneed me in the groin and my hand nearly dropped my staff. Somehow I still held onto it, but I had no leverage to use the weapon at this range. "This is how you killed her, my niece? How does it feel? How does it feel to have the life choked out of you?" I struggled to try and free myself, hitting him with the staff. I even tried to stab him in the foot a few times. My healing spells faded, their magic spent. I started to lose consciousness. Somehow I always knew this fight wasn't going to end well for me. I struggled to the bitter end. "You have died." I felt my body sliding to the ground as he released me. I got the next message as Abida was turning around. "Second chance has activated." I thanked the system for this skill and wasted no time, activating Flurry. I lurched forward, Abida already turning back towards me as he sensed something was wrong. It was too late, and I was too close for him to react. The blunt end of my staff struck out, hammering at the man's good side, along with his torso. He still managed to get his arm up to block many of my strikes. I heard snapping bones as my attacks rained home, 16 in all. Abida stumbled back and fell. His arm had been reduced to a crushed mess, his ragged breathing forming pink foam on his lips from his punctured lung. I pulled out a health injector and another mana injector. Already I could see the guards racing to kill me before their leader fell. I cast Shroud, covering the area in a heavy blanket of mist. The cold made it all the more miserable to be in, but I endured. "Cough, you think this is over? Our family will hunt you down for this." I didn't answer the man. Instead, I circled around behind him. He tried to track me, using his legs to twist and keep me in view. You had to admire him for his tenacity if nothing else. Once I got clear of a possible attack from his legs, I smashed the staff down on his face. He let out a wet gurgle. I repeated the action until I got the message I wanted to see. "Lethal damage, you have killed Abida Kuth." The battle was a near thing. Even with the man being partially crippled and without his main ability to teleport, he still managed to kill me. If it wasn't for second chance, I would be just as dead as Sheila and Moana. Hell, if he had destroyed my head, my spell wouldn't have been able to save me anyway. I got extremely lucky that he chose to strangle me. I looked away from the corpse and to the mist blanketing everything around. Even I couldn't see through it. I activated my talisman and swept my gaze through the fog. Some of the men had gotten within 50 feet of my position before the fog engulfed them. They were wandering around slowly, trying to make their way farther in. I firmed the grip on my staff and waded forward. Chapter 56, Checkmate. I finished off the last of the guards caught in the mist. It was laughably easy to kill them one by one. I secured their items while my mana recharged. A few storage rings, quite a bit of credit, and their weapons. The weapons I would sell, along with most of the storage rings. I would keep Abida's, it was another 7 cubic foot ring. I was going into the last fight without my biggest advantage available to me. Area of Denial would cost me 1000 mana if I wanted to use it again so soon. I could wait, but that would give the man time to recover. No, it was better just to deal with it now. I did recast Second Chance though. I walked towards the looming Black Dragon headquarters. It was time for this to end, one way or another. I kicked open the door and was surprised to find nobody. The ground floor was empty and quiet. Only the soft hum of the monogenerator in the background. I wasn't about to risk taking the elevator. 20 flights of stairs it was. Thank God for enhanced stats, I thought as I topped the final flight of stairs. I was breathing heavily from the exertion, but I wasn't winded. I cracked open the door to see the hallway quiet. Even the receptionist was gone from her desk. I made my way over to the office door, pushing it open with my staff. I was primed to retaliate instantly if I needed to. The door swung open quietly, showing an empty office. He must be in his apartment. I knew it was on the same floor from a few visits with Charla over the months. The hallway to his apartment ended in a large steel security door. It was locked tight. I tapped on it with my staff, getting a dull thud. So not just steel, but concrete filled as well. A month ago I wouldn't have had any way past this door without relying on my magma enhancement. Even then, if this had just been a simple metal door, I would still have had to use it. Instead, I used metamagic and Earth Fist to tear a hole open in the door, utilizing the concrete inside. The whole floor shook as my spell slowly tore apart the metal lining. I had to cast it repeatedly to make a hole wide enough to get through. Nobody came to attack me in that entire time. I kind of wondered where Jacob had wandered off to, but put that thought aside as I stepped into the apartment. Harold Cotton was a minimalist, and his apartment reflected that stark view. Light wood walls accented the darker wood flooring and the exposed metal rafters of the ceiling. The kitchen was done in mostly stainless steel, nothing on the counters to even mark that someone lived here. I looked around the open space and headed towards the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, so I pushed it the rest of the way open with my staff. Lying in the bed was Harold Cotton, or what was left of him. He was missing his hips and everything below that, along with one of his arms from the elbow down. The open wounds had been healed up, but the rest of the damage had yet to repair itself. The man was hooked to an 4-drip that looked to be keeping him sedated. This had been the man that led the Black Dragons, the one that decided all the world should be enslaved. How the mighty have fallen! I walked over to his bed and used the broken blade on my staff to cut open his jugular. The man didn't so much as twitch, as heavily drugged as he was. I waited. Lethal damage, you have killed Harold Cotton. The message didn't bring me any peace of mind or joy, only closure. I walked out of the room and didn't look back. I needed to speak with the shadows, then I was done with Chicago. They could clean up the rest. Jacob appeared as I stepped out of the building. Is it done? I nodded. Good, come with me and we can report to Stone. I followed the man past all the dead bodies, only sparing a glance for Moana and Sheila. They should have run, perhaps then they would have survived. We continued walking in silence, past the damaged gate. I hadn't seen a soul since I exited the headquarters. Either the Shadow faction had cleaned up the remaining members already, or they had all fled. It didn't matter to me anymore. Half an hour later we came across a plain-looking building. The way these people wanted to meet left me wary, but I chalked it up to the group's eccentricity. She's in the basement waiting for us. Reluctantly, I followed Jacob inside. It was gloomy in the building. We disturbed untouched dust as we walked. Jacob crossed the floor and entered the stairwell down to the basement. I followed a few feet behind. Each step made me second-guess coming here. However, Jacob never paused to look back or check to see if I was following. If he had, I might have just turned around and left. We stopped at a door. She's in here, the man said, waving me forward. I turned the handle and opened the door. What greeted me was a swirling portal open to a burning desert. I could feel the heat from this end. I turned to Jacob with a questioning look. 3 other people had joined him in the short time I was faced away, including Stone. So, it's like that. Sorry, it has to be this way, Paul, you are far too dangerous to have in our backyard, Stone said. My staff appeared in my hand ready to attack the 4, but something pricked my skin and my body froze up. A 5th man walked from behind me to join the others. A 30-second paralysis debuff appeared in my view. Stone looked at me. Don't worry, Paul. We won't kill you, you did us a great favor today. But like I said, we can't have you here. This portal leads to some other location on Earth. Eventually, you may find your way back. Perhaps by then, you will have conquered your emotions. Goodbye, Paul, thanks for the assistance. The 4 men hoisted me into the air and threw me into the portal. Stone picked up my staff and tossed it through. Wouldn't want to leave you unarmed. The immobilization wore off just as I hit the ground, the portal 10 feet in the air. I tried to scramble to my feet and jump back through as the portal winked shut. Fuck! I screamed, why is everyone such a prick? I kicked the sand a few times as I cursed each and every one of those people. Had they even bothered to ask me, I would have told them I planned to leave Chicago right after talking with them. Eventually, my anger subsided. What was the point? They had done what they thought they needed to do, not that I didn't still hate them for it. It upset my future plans quite a bit. My first stop would have been to meet up with Frotzar and finally retrieve my reward, then I had planned to return to Fiona's commander and explain to him what transpired. Now, where the hell was I? I looked around at the endless sea of yellow sand. You assholes could have at least dumped me on a tropical paradise. I picked a direction and started walking. If I died out here, I would haunt the shit out of those pricks. I ended up removing my armor completely, this left me in only my leather pants and a thin shirt. I didn't have any other clothes to wear. After about 5 minutes of walking, I had to remove the pants as well. Now I was down to my boxers. At least I wouldn't die of dehydration. Regenerating rain would keep me hydrated. As I walked, I thought. The Shadow faction must have a portal mage, it explained why nobody had been able to find them so far. I wonder how far their organization spread or where they were truly located. My contemplation was interrupted as the sand under me shifted. At first, I thought the sand was sliding down, but I quickly realized I wasn't on a steep dune. No, this was something else, something under the sand. I felt the sand shift again and I tried to jump out of the way, the sand below me sinking down into a funnel. I scrabbled at the sides of the quickly widening pit, just barely clearing the mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth that appeared a few seconds later. I fired off a quick identify. Sand Devourer level XX. The worm-like creature wasn't Shihayelid-sized, thank God, but it was still large enough to swallow me whole. The fact that I couldn't see its level meant it was at least level 27. I decided not to stick around to find out. I clawed the rest of the way out of the hole and started to run. If most of my skills weren't still on cooldown, I may have tried to take the creature on. The creature let out a moaning wail as it slammed its body into the sand towards my direction. The sand stirred at the creature's prompting and a wave of sand sped towards me. Figures this thing could use magic. I turned and stamped my foot down while casting Disruption. I hoped the spell would help cancel out the creatures. The spell failed to go off. Shit, I forgot the spell description said rock. I quickly used Earth Fist instead. A pillar of sand rose in the path of the attack. It didn't stop it completely, but it seemed to reduce the attack somewhat. The rest of the tidal wave of sand slammed into me, knocking me from my feet as the sand poured on top of me. I was buried to my waist in the sand and the creature was starting to sink back down so it could finish me off. I wiggled around frantically trying to move the sand away enough to free myself. I managed to do so before the creature closed in. I pulled my legs from the sand and began to run again. I tried to think of anything I could use to stop the creature from chasing me. The creature surfaced again, this time I cast Blink Step. The spell cost me 200 mana since I had multicast it and it was still less than an hour from the multicast cooldown. I looked behind me, another wave of sand was coming my way but I was able to outrun it with my skill. It appeared like the Devourer knew this as well. It dropped back into its hole and sped after me. It wasn't as fast as I was, with my skill running, but it was faster than I was on foot normally. I imbued my staff with ice and water as I ran, figuring a creature of sand and desert may want to avoid the cold. As the beast closed, I slammed the staff into the ground and activating Disruption again for another 275 mana. There was no wave but the water seeped into the ground in the spell's area of effect and froze solid. I heard the creature screech as it neared the cold. It turned and fled in the opposite direction. I was glad to be proven correct. I stopped to catch my breath, thankful that had worked to scare the creature off, at least temporarily. I doubt it would be enough to stop it completely. I continued running as soon as I got my breath back. The sand was not easy to run on and it took a lot more of my energy to keep up a fast pace. I wasn't surprised when 20 minutes later I heard the sand moving. I looked back to see a crest of sand approaching quickly. I used the same combo I used before, but the creature swerved around the frozen section of sand this time. Shit. Time to try something new. I ran to stand in the center of my frozen patch, activating Eye of the Storm. A blizzard of snow, ice, and sand circled around me. The temperature around me plummeted, forcing the creature away again. I let the spell drop as the devourer fled once again. We danced this way for hours, each time the creature would leave only to return. It seemed to have boundless energy, and I was starting to get exhausted from the running. Bella turned out not to be very effective at running on the sand either. She sunk more than she ran with her bulk and thin to lone feet. I needed to find a safe place to rest up. Looking around, I could still only see sand. For all I knew, the next dune over could have an oasis hiding behind it. If I could keep it up for another hour, my area of denial would reset. My other option was to glass the sand with my magma combination. It would probably keep the beast at bay, but would leave me trapped in the center of a superheated area of sand. My fire tornado trick was bad enough, heat-wise. If it came down to it, I would use the combination though. As I ran, I thought I saw a discoloration in the sand to my right. I decided to risk it and adjusted my heading towards the spot. I stepped off the last dune into a hard-packed, cracked, and dried basin. I almost fell to my knees and kissed the ground in thanks. I needed to make sure I was safe though. I moved towards the center of the area. Tall dunes of sand surrounded a 30-foot area that had been blown clear. An hour went by. I heard the beast circling the area looking for me a few times. It never entered the area I was in though. I figured it had some synergy with sand with the way it used it to attack me. The beast finally gave up after another hour of fruitless searching. I watched it move away, the sand cresting in its path. Finally, I collapsed to the ground and passed out. Chapter 57, Friendly Face. Fiona used her sword and skills to fight off the tormented souls that resided in this place with her. Most were rather weak, but there were many and they didn't stay down long. She had tried to get Paul's help. His consciousness had occasionally shown up in this realm. But something prevented him from helping. She didn't think it was just fear. She knew that was part of it, she still felt it sometimes. No, something had changed in the living world and Paul couldn't help her. At least until a few weeks ago. Something changed again. His presence stronger now, she could feel it. With that change, the ghosts became agitated and tried to attack his being. She fought them off every day while his mind rested. Eventually, she learned how to form her will into weapons and armor to help her defend the man. She didn't blame the man for her death, that was on her for failing to defeat the duelist. Each day she fought, she grew stronger and the hordes of spirits grew weaker. Still, they persisted, like mindless undead. Her blade struck out, glowing with ethereal power as it cleaved another spirit in two. The creature howled in agony as it dissolved into vapor. It would return. Something kept all of these spirits, including hers, tied to Paul. It was probably his conscience. His world had strange ideas about killing someone that tried to kill you, or doing what you must to survive. Her blade flicked out again, lopping another spirit's head off. Eventually, they would overwhelm her like they always did and she would be torn asunder, just to start all over again. She didn't want to know what happened to Paul during those times. She doubted it was anything good. She attacked another one as the rest rushed her. She fought as fiercely as possible as they tore at her, ripping parts of her essence apart. It was in vain, she still wasn't strong enough. I awoke in a cold sweat, the nightmares were back. I was out of pills as of a week ago. I didn't go to get more because things were moving too quickly and I hadn't suffered for a few days. I sat up, looking at my surroundings. The wind had blown the sand a few feet closer to me while I slept. I was glad for my elemental resistance though, as the hot sun beating down had not been able to fry my skin to a crisp. I got up and stretched my sore muscles while I tried to recall the specifics of my nightmare this time. I saw Fiona fighting off the other faces of people I murdered, or allowed to die. It was never enough though. They dragged her down and tore her apart. I swear I remember her looking at me and smiling before her form faded away. As far as nightmares went, it wasn't the worst one I've had to date. I had no idea what time it was. The sun was setting, so it was closing in on evening. I must have slept at least 4 hours as my second chance buff had run out. I recast all my buffs while I stretched. Now that I had solid earth to work with, I decided to try something. I stood in the center of the area and concentrated, utilizing metamagic and earth fist. Ever so slowly I lifted a 5-foot section of the ground I stood on. I got it to a height of 2 feet before I had to stop and recover mana. This is going to take a while. 2 hours later I managed to get a stone pole 30 feet into the air. I was a good 10 feet above the highest dunes. I slowly scanned the area for anything. Now that it was after sundown, lights of any type would be much easier to spot. Eventually, I spotted a slight glow far in the distance. I might have even missed it if I hadn't upped my perception at the last level. I jumped from the top of the stone and set off towards the light. A few more hours of travel brought me to a small walled compound. The sand devourer was nowhere in sight. It must have finally moved off to stalk other prey. The gate was open and 2 lizards in metal armor guarded the entrance with long spears. They eyed me but otherwise let me pass. Perhaps it was the fact that I had my weapon stored. Or the fact that I was wandering around the desert in my underwear and a shirt tied around my head and nothing else. I thought it might be the latter, as other lizard folk gave me curious gazes as I walked towards a central fountain. I fell to my knees and drank deeply of the fresh cool water. It turned out my regenerating rain spell was not very helpful at refreshing my thirst. It was harder than I thought to catch the droplets in my mouth. A yellow and red spotted lizardman wearing a white scarf on its head approached me as I drank. "Greetings, traveler. What brings you to my tiny piece of heaven?" I pulled my soaking head from the fountain. I just needed to cool off. "Sorry for any inconvenience I may have caused." "No need to apologize, the desert is an unforgivable mistress for those not born of its loving embrace." "My name is Gok, what is yours?" I stood up and accepted the offered hand, Paul, and I was dumped in the desert by a group that I thought I could trust. Well, at least one that had goals that aligned. A sad tale, I'm sure. I could allow you to stay one night, but we have few amenities out here. If you are looking for a village or the edge of the desert, I can point the way. I kind of got the feeling that while a gracious host, they didn't care for outsiders. I decided just to get directions to the nearest city and go from there. If you could point me to the closest city, I would appreciate it. Very well, head east for 3 days. The city of Armen lies at the edge of the desert. It is not a city I was familiar with before. I assumed he meant before the system transported him and his people over to Earth. Thanks again, Gok. You wouldn't happen to have a water skin or something I can transport drinkable water in, would you? If you are willing to trade, we might be able to provide you with something. In the end, it cost me all of the weapons I had taken from the Black Dragon members to secure a child-sized water pouch. None of the lizard folk was willing to give up a larger pouch. I understood, water was life, out in the desert. I thanked them for their hospitality as I exited the compound and headed east. I was 3 hours into my journey across the burning sands when I thought I spotted something in my peripheral vision. My staff appeared in my hand as I whirled towards what I thought I saw. Nothing was there, except the rising heat off the baking sand. Heat must be getting to me. It happened again an hour later. I swear I saw a wispy form of something. I chalked it up to delirium and the heat. With my water bag and my old set of armor, I managed to funnel enough of my spell's water into the thing to refill it. It wasn't a quick or easy process. Once that was done, I continued on. One of the communications people rushed in. "Sir, we lost communications with Chicago." Randy gave the man a withering look. "What do you mean by lost communication?" The man gulped audibly before responding. "We are unable to contact anyone at headquarters. We tried all the backup channels as well. We thought it might be some power or magic blocking our communications, so we also reached out to the closest outpost to HQ. They picked up without issue." "Did they have anything to say about headquarters?" Randy asked, annoyed. The man hesitated for a bit before answering. "They said there was a slave revolt, sir." Randy slammed his hand into the table, cracking it. "I warned my younger brother that he was playing a dangerous game. Any word of my family or Abida?" "And no, sir. Dispatch Michael's team to find out what happened." "Are right away, sir," the man said, giving him a salute before he left. "What's the status of New York?" Randy asked, turning to his lieutenant. "Mostly secured. Many of the factions killed themselves off in the early days of the fighting. The rest were easy to take down with our teams." "Good. Once we're done, I will be taking Team 4 and heading back to Chicago to meet up with Michael to see what he discovered. You will remain here and consolidate our position. Eliminate anyone that doesn't fall in line." Randy turned to leave but stopped and turned back around. "Execute all our current slaves." "It will be carried out immediately, sir." He always thought slaves were a liability they didn't need. If it was true that a revolt had happened, they were now more of a liability than a help. Randy ripped the black armband off. It would no longer be needed after today. I was glad to still have my Trubar armor, the nights were beyond frigid in the desert. With no safe place to stop and rest, I just kept going. I would pause occasionally to rest my muscles or eat and drink. Whatever I had seen during the day had left me alone after sunset. I still thought it might be a mirage brought on by the heat. Identify hadn't been able to detect anything. As I crested the next dune, I spotted the top of a palm tree in the distance. It was so shocking to see that I just stood there motionless for over a minute. I ran down and up the dunes as fast as I could to get to the tree. I even went so far as to use blink step, to get there faster. Trees meant water, and water would likely mean a place I could rest. Each hill brought me closer and I started spotting the tops of more trees. I pushed myself even harder, cresting the last dune 10 minutes later. A small oasis greeted me, about 20 trees around a small pool of water, surrounded by thick vegetation. As much as my body demanded me to just rush in and fall asleep on the inviting green grass, I decided that caution might be prudent. My staff appeared in my hand as I stepped into the grass. It was about knee-length and soft, blowing in the slight breeze of the night. The area was quiet, no sounds of any animals or bugs intruded on this sanctuary. I made a lap around the area, checking for any animal tracks. I didn't find any signs of life or bones for that matter. I searched the entire oasis without finding anything. I'm going to name you the hidden gem. I waited but no notification presented itself. I guess that answers my question. Someone had already been here. The water looked clear and inviting as I walked up to the edge of the pool. I dipped a stick into the water. It came out intact. Well, at least it's not acid. I guess I'll try a drink. I scooped up a handful of water and lifted it to my lips. You have been poisoned. I quickly checked the icon before I started any healing. Sand Serpent's Kiss debuff, your body withers as all of your fluids are expelled. Causes 300 damage every 10 seconds, 4 minutes, and 51 seconds remaining. I braced for the first tick of damage. The pain was excruciating, I could feel sweat pour from my body as my skin started to dry out. Thankfully I had my Grin and Bear It title reducing poison damage by 50%. I tried to cleanse the poison but my spell failed to do so. I quickly started healing the damage. Nothing to do but wait. I guess this explained the lack of bodies. Even bones would be reduced to dust under the effect of this poison. It was a weird balancing act of healing and drinking water while refilling it with my other healing spell. After the poison wore off I was exhausted. I pulled out my sleeping bag and fell asleep in the grass. Chapter 58, Ghosts. Fiona felt a shift, the angry ghosts no longer assaulting her as they looked into the distance. Something was drawing them away. This felt bad. She rushed through the other specters, cutting them down as she passed. Enraged screams howled for her blood. She made it through the throng of figures to see what looked like a pool. Only it wasn't showing the bottom of a pool, but stars and trees. A few specters had already reached the edge and sank into the water only to appear on the other side. No. She ran after the specters, she didn't know why but the feeling that Paul was in mortal danger wouldn't leave her. She reached the pool and rushed in. A moment of disorientation greeted her as she popped into the mortal realm. She could tell it was the mortal realm because of the trees and sand. The one thing out of place was the undead that came through before her and was likely to come through after. She materialized her phantom blade and let out a screech towards the 3 specters floating towards Paul's unconscious form. She sped after them, cutting the first 2 down with ease. The third one produced a blade of its own and the fight was on. She eventually won the contest as the last remaining specter didn't have nearly her aptitude with forming a blade yet. She watched as it faded to vapor before turning to address the rest. Dozens had climbed out of the pool and were all heading towards Paul. The system had bound them together and so she would fight, and if need be die again and again for him. I awoke to the sound of wailing and bone-chilling cold. Wispy figures were popping out of the poisonous pool and all coming towards me. All except one that seemed to be fighting them off. I quickly used Identify. Nightmare Spectre X25 level 8. Spectral Companion level 13. I scooted back as a few closed in on me, whipping my staff at them. It passed harmlessly through them, seeming to cause no damage. I clambered to my feet but one managed to touch me. Its attack passing straight through my armor. I could feel the bone-chilling touch of the undead as it tried to swipe at me again. I backed away and tried to target it with a healing spell. Nothing. They must be incorporeal. I kept backing away. Hopefully, whomever this spectral companion was could deal with them. At least it looked like they stopped coming out of the pool finally. I tried a few more spells to see if anything affected the specters. Only stunning gust seemed to have any effect, blowing them back a few feet. At least it was something. I ran around avoiding the creatures, using stunning gust to push any back that got too close. Luckily they seemed more fixated on me, than fighting the other one. It managed to cut through them in a few minutes. Fiona cut down the last spectre and received a strange message. Congratulations, you have fended off the nightmare and kept your charge safe. Ability granted. Partial corporeality, ability to phase in and out, to partially affect the real world. She also noticed she had a level and a class again, not that she knew what a spectral companion was, but she had a decent guess. She floated over to Paul. The man still had his staff up and ready to attack. Not a lot of good it would do against her though. Stay back, ghost. Technically, I'm a spectre. Wait, that voice, no it can't be, Fiona. In the flesh, or should I say ectoplasm? Bad jokes aside, how? No, I must be hallucinating or dreaming, Fiona would never joke like that. I ran my hand through the misty form. Yep, must be hallucinating. That's when Fiona slapped me across the face. Ow, okay, not hallucinating. Next time don't touch a woman without her consent. As for the how, I'm not sure. I suspect it has something to do with your conscience keeping the spirits sustained. My guilty conscience was supporting the souls of those I killed or felt conflicted about. Well, that sucked. I guess that could explain my nightmares. I assume that was you and the rest of the people I killed. Fiona's form nodded. I protected you as well as I could while you slept. So how are you here now, and not still wherever you were before? I followed the other specters through the pool, then we appeared here. I can only assume that the pool somehow connected the realms of the living and dead together, somehow. I wondered if it was because I drank from the poisoned water or because of the many creatures that probably died from drinking it. I guess it didn't matter. So what now? I guess I get to follow you around and protect you. Someone needs to keep you from doing something stupid. I'm glad you're back, Fiona, but I can't exactly have a spectre following me around all day. Her form seemed to drift apart and I thought she had moved on or something until I heard her whisper in my ear, "Don't worry, nobody will even know I am here." Her breathy voice in my ear stirred emotions I thought better left alone. Although, I did wonder how the mechanics of something like that would even work. I was glad that she was alive. Well, back anyway, at least in some form. So, where are we anyway? I looked to the right, where I thought I heard her speaking. Could you remain visible when we are alone? It's hard enough to grasp this whole situation without having to guess where you are. Fine, she pouted, reforming into her wispy form from before. She had definitely changed since she had been alive. Less rigid than she was before, no pun intended. It was, kind of nice. I have no clue, I got thrown through a portal and landed in this desert. There should be a city a few days east of here called Armen. She just looked at me with a judgmental tone. See, you need someone to have your back. I didn't disagree with her. I wanted to be able to trust people, but my luck with that was pretty poor up to this point. So, what are you capable of? She shrugged. I can fight off ghosts and slap you as far as I know. How are you able to hit me anyway? It's a skill I picked up after saving you from the other specters. It seems like I can activate it at will. Well, that's handy. I guess we might as well continue walking, or in your case floating. Her form seemed to solidify some more and her feet formed. Now she looked like a mostly transparent version of her former self, ghostly armor and all. Better. I nodded. Hey, let me try something. Can you make your form corporeal for a bit? Sure. I tried casting my buffs on her. To my surprise, they actually worked. I was even able to add her to my party. Well, didn't think that would work. Go incorporeal again and let's see if they remain. Her form faded slightly and she dropped out of the party, so I couldn't tell if the buffs remained. Do you still have the buffs? No. I guess the magic had to be tied to something physical to work. It also explained why I couldn't target the others with my spells before. Fiona would need to be careful in her corporeal form though. If I could cast buffs on her, she could be hit by magic or healing. If our previous experience with the undead proved anything, it was that healing damaged them severely. I let her know as much and she just smiled. The sun was starting to come up, and along with it the heat of the day. So I removed my armor again. I really needed to get some other clothes. I heard Fiona whistle in appreciation as I stripped to my underwear again. I just rolled my eyes and started walking, her form fake walking beside me. So, what have I missed since I died? She said with her hands clasped behind her back like some super energetic teenager. I turned my head slightly towards her and gave her a quizzical look. You are different than I remember. Are you sure you're the same Fiona? She stopped her antics. I guess I'm just excited to be free from that place, the chance to experience the world again, even if only as a specter. Guess I can't fault you for that. Where would you like me to start? As we walked I relayed the story of my last 4 months. Some parts were harder to talk about than others, but I told her anyway. I figured if anyone would understand it would be her, dead or not. So they are all dead. Most of the main ones. I figure the Shadow faction will probably finish off the rest. Her form literally glowed at that news. Good to know I could tell her mood. I chuckled. What's so funny? I had planned to leave right after meeting with the Shadow faction, so they spent all that time to try and set me up for nothing. Hell, they even helped me out. Fiona floated in front of me. How so? She asked, floating backward while I walked. Well, if it wasn't for them you would still be stuck in, well, wherever you were. Now that you're back I couldn't think of anyone else I would rather have by my side. Ah, you're gonna make a ghost girl blush. I rolled my eyes. So what are your plans after getting to this village? I shrugged. I hadn't really thought about it. Too busy trying to survive in this hostile desert. The usual I guess, hunt monsters, look for dungeons, explore, who knows. I just don't want to be tied down to any single location. Especially with what happened in Fox Valley and farther north. My tolerance for dealing with people has grown quite short, being tortured day in and day out will tend to do that to a person. Fiona stopped floating backward, forcing me to stop or walk through her, and that felt like I would be violating some unspoken rule. Paul, you need to regain your humanity, your love of life. It was one of the things I admired about you, you were always upbeat, willing to tackle any challenge. I can't watch you wallow in self-pity or dwell on what happened in the past. Easy for you to say, I muttered. Her slap sent me reeling to the ground. This is what I mean. The Paul the First remembered wouldn't have said something so insensitive, he may have been curt but never hurtful. I rubbed my sore jaw as I stood. I didn't offer an apology, even though I knew she was right. I continued walking as she returned to walking beside me. We walked silently for hours before I felt a distinct rumble in the sand. My staff appeared in my hand as I scanned the dunes. I spotted the sand devourer trail. It was coming straight for us, well, for me since Fiona was insubstantial. We have company. Fiona looked to where I was pointing. What is it? A sand devourer, level unknown. So we fighting or running? I ran enough, time to teach this overgrown earthworm what I can do. Fiona smiled at this, her ethereal sword coalescing in her grip. Good. I wanted to test out my abilities against the living. A shiver went down my spine, I was glad she was on my side. I decided to go with water and lightning this time, imbuing my staff with the elements. I waited for the beast to come up under me and leaped into the air as the vortex of sand started. The angry worm burst from the sand pit and tried grabbing at me, but my jump enhanced with godly might carried me well outside its upper reach. As I reached the apex of my jump I cast Eye of the Storm. Let's see how you like a storm. The winds of the spell whipped the sand around, soaking everything with torrential rains as bolts of lightning impacted the ground, flash melting bits of sand. The beast was impacted repeatedly as it was slowly pulled from the sand by the upward rising current of air. The beast howled in outrage, trying to retract into the wet sand or use it against me. It was no use, the sand had too much water and its control had been diluted. That's when Fiona struck. Her ghostly sword slid easily through the creature's thick bony plates. It spasmed with each attack, trying to flatten its attacker. Fiona just faded back into her spectral form or floated away from the attacks. The beast started thrashing violently as I finally landed on the ground. It opened its cavernous mouth wide and I could see a furnace of death. It turned its open maw toward me and released a jet of superheated air. The attack blasted through part of my storm, leaving melted sand in its wake. My enhanced storm was the only thing that saved me from its attack. I couldn't keep it up for much longer and the lightning strikes didn't seem to stun the creature as they should. It did cause it to twitch violently with each strike, so it was harming the creature. I kept the spell up for a total of 10 seconds, draining my mana to around 100 points. It was refilling quickly though. The beast flailed about as Fiona attacked it. I could see it readying another one of those heat attacks. I cast Impact Blink Step and Calcifying Strike as my mana hit 120. As Fiona distracted it, I raced in, slamming my staff against the creature's exposed belly. The creature wailed in pain and whipped its body around at an astounding speed. It caught me across the shoulder, tossing me 20 feet away. I landed heavily in the sand, my arm was broken by the attack. I stumbled to my feet and turned to watch. My attack had been successful. Imbue had activated, stunning the creature finally. While it was stunned, its body quickly started to calcify from my attack. A 5-foot area had turned to stone before the stun wore off. The creature was irate and the sand around it began to boil and melt as it raged against the damage my spell was inflicting. I was glad I decided against trying my fire-earth combination. I had to run from the area. Even with my elemental resistance, I was starting to take damage from the heat. Fiona didn't seem to suffer the same shortcomings. She would attack and retreat, switching between her forms. After 3 more minutes, the sand devourer finally fell silent. Everything within 30 meters was molten glass. As it cooled, you could hear sharp cracks, bits of glass spraying as the glass cooled rapidly. Fiona floated over to me as I waited for the area to cool. That was an interesting fight. I see you have picked up some new skills. Well, I did gain 3 levels. How about you? The fight was informative. It seems I can switch my state as long as I am not attacking. No new skills though. Still, you are almost impossible to beat unless someone can hit your spectral form. Yes, I will need to be cautious of that. The worm was able to damage me slightly in my corporeal form. It is healing, but it is slow. I would offer to heal you, but we know what it does to undead. Yet, let's not test that until I am fully healed. Once the ground was cool enough, I walked across the glass. It crunched and snapped underfoot. As we closed, I could see how much of the creature had been turned to stone. It seemed a good portion of its top half had been calcified, whatever ability it used in the end not able to cancel out the effects of my spell. I looted it and received a surprise. Mana Heart. Scale X3. This Mana Heart was 3 times the size of the one I used in my armor. It was also blood red in color as opposed to the greenish-hued one I got from the Centipede Queen. Fiona floated up. I don't think I have ever seen a Mana Heart quite that large. The beast must have been level 30 at least. Any idea what it's worth? She shook her head. No, but it would be substantial. Have you made any progress in your crafting? Perhaps you could use it to power armor or a weapon. I forgot to tell her about my armor. I did manage to find some time. Unfortunately, my armor was damaged in the fight with Abida. I thought Mithril would be stronger. Mithril? That seems extreme for armor. Do you have it on you? I pulled the armor from my ring and set it on the ground for her to look at. It was weird watching her hover halfway in the ground to inspect it. It is truly a stunning piece of armor. Now, I am no expert in the field, but did you magically imbue the runes you carved? No, I carved them normally. Why? That might be your problem. Since we were required to maintain our own armor, I had to learn a few things about the metals. I recall hearing that Mithril would lose its strength if it was altered in any way non-magically. I looked at my very expensive set of armor and the runes that covered every piece of Mithril. Well shit. A quick test using my staff confirmed Fiona's suspicion. The plates broke under a full strength swing. I tossed it back into my ring. I would have to deal with that train wreck later. For now, we continued towards the city. Chapter 59, Civilization. Can you keep an eye out for me? I have some items to go through. I will try, but I didn't sense that sand devourer coming, so just don't get too distracted, Fiona said, floating higher up. I nodded to her, pulling out the first book I got in Chicago. I flipped through the pages and determined it was worthless. I put it in one of my spare rings. I continued going through the books. About half of them turned out to be useless for what I wanted. Where did all the books come from? I looked up at Fiona. I stole them from the library in Chicago. I was hoping to further my knowledge about runes and armor crafting. So does that mean you want to settle down and become a crafter? No, I just thought it would help me. Can't hurt, right? So, anything interesting? There are a few books that might be interesting. I will need to sit down and actually read them though. Does that mean you are done sorting your items? Almost. I still have to go through the stuff I stole off of Sharla, her father, and Abida. I had to search through 8 storage rings before I found Sharla's. Of course, it had to be the last ring I searched in. I pulled out each item one at a time and inspected it. Crafted leather brigandine. Quality, excellent. Armor, 18. Slashing resistance, 40%. Stabbing resistance, 40%. This metal-reinforced leather brigandine was crafted by a novice crafter with good materials. When I pulled out the armor, it brought up old feelings of rage and anger. It had a silver-embroidered dragon head, prominent on the chest. I should remove the fabric and replace it with something else before I sold the armor. Putting it back, I checked the other items. Health Injector, 100 HP, x10. Mana Injector, 100 HP, x10. Clark Family Long Sword. Teleportation Scrambler. Enhanced Slave Collars x6. Rations x20. Water Bottle x5. Emergency Signal Ring. I slapped my forehead when I found the food and water. I should have checked the rings earlier. Oh well, the weapons I traded weren't worth much anyway. I took all the health and mana items into my ring. Fiona floated down when I pulled out the sword, touching it lovingly. I asked her what she wanted me to do with it. If we ever return to the commander, please give it to him. Perhaps he can find a way to return it to my family. I nodded. I was tempted to just toss the slave collars into the sand and let them be buried for all eternity. But I held off, deciding they may come in handy as improvised explosives again. I tucked them away, for now. Eventually, I would transfer them to one of the smaller rings. The teleportation scrambler was a neat item. I remember it was the item Charla's father had given to her. It looks like she kept it. Teleportation scrambler produces a field that prevents anyone from entering a room without using a standard entrance. That would come in handy. I think I will keep it. The last item was the emergency signal ring. I checked the description. Emergency signal ring. Triggering the ring using a bit of mana will alert the wearer of the other ring that you are in danger. The ring was useless without its counterpart. Neither Abida nor Charla's father had the ring on them. My guess was it was lost in the building destruction. I tossed the ring into the sand as I kept walking. Harold and Abida had very little on them. Certainly no storage rings. I did get an interesting ring from Abida. Temporal skip. Once per day the user can skip in time. Fiona. Yes, she asked, floating down. Tell me what this looks like. I activated the ring as I walked forward. I could feel the effects deactivate after 2 seconds. How odd, it looks like you leave after images as you walked. I thought as much. Abida used the item against me in our fight. I might hold on to it. I put the ring in my storage. Charla's father had no items on him. I did pry open the safe in his office though. There were mostly documents about the Black Dragon. Those I left, but I did take the journal and the credit stick that was stored in there. That added another 2,000 credits to my measly 15 I had left from my shopping spree. I would look through the journal later. I let Fiona know I completed my inventory. The other small rings held nothing of value other than slave collars. I chose one and dumped the useless books and items into that ring. Maybe someone would want to buy them. I pulled my staff out and inspected it. It was in rough shape. The blade was broken off and it was discolored from my repeated use of multiple imbuements. I needed a weapon capable of handling my elemental powers. It was obvious my current staff would not last much longer at this rate. Maybe it was finally time to runecraft a staff. The rest of the day went by quietly. I actually forgot Fiona was there until her voice startled me. Incoming. I looked toward the direction she was pointing. I couldn't tell what it was, but there was a plume of dust. Any idea who or what it is? Riders of some sort. I'm going invisible. I nodded and drew my staff, then I checked to see if all my buffs were active. I stood at the top of the dune watching the 3 riders approach on four-wheelers. They stopped about 100 feet out. The one in the lead turned towards the other 2 before they hopped off the vehicle. The person walked toward me. Hello there, friend, the man spoke in a thick Creole accent. That's far enough, what do you want? I asked, keeping my staff planted in the ground. Clem spotted someone wandering in the desert and we thought we could provide aid. We didn't mean to startle you, friend, and we mean no harm. I snorted at that. You from Armen? We are, haven't seen you around before. How'd you hear about our little slice of heaven? I ran across Gok's compound. Ah, the scaly folk, nice enough if you're trading. I guess if you want to be fleeced for some simple items. The man laughed at that. True enough. I'm Martin, by the way. We do monster patrols and trade with the surrounding communities. You want a ride to Armen? I looked towards the 4-wheeler and asked, how did you get those running? The man looked back towards his vehicle. "Oh, those old things, good old Creole engineering," the man said, smiling. "I knew they weren't Mana engines. Too much noise for one, and the smoke coming out of the tailpipe spoke of the internal combustion." While we were talking, I saw Fiona fade into view behind the other two vehicles. She didn't pull her blade, so I figured things looked okay on her end. "Well, if you're offering a ride, I guess it would be rude for me to decline. By the way, what state am I in?" "Well, Armen was located in southern Louisiana. Hard to say if we are in the same state anymore. Can't see the ocean and we haven't spotted it within 3 days' ride of Armen." I grit my teeth. It could take me months to find my way back north. Might just be better to stay in this area. I started walking down the hill. When I got to the bottom, I shook Martin's hand. "I'm Paul, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Paul." "That's Clem and Joshua," the man said, gesturing to each. Now that I was close enough, I used identify on all three. It was more important for me to know what I was dealing with than offending people. Martin Occultist level 7. Clem Ranger level 8. Joshua Shifter level 7. "Go ahead and hop on the back, Paul. Make sure you hold on tight, it's a rough ride in this sand, we have to go quite fast to avoid the sandworms." I nodded in response. Their chosen classes were interesting. I was slightly surprised by the low levels though. I guess it made sense if they didn't have to fight constantly like I was forced to. I stored my staff and got a raised eyebrow from Martin. "Storage ring," I said, showing him the item on my finger. I wasn't afraid of these three attacking me and was curious to see their reaction. Mild interest was all I saw from their eyes. "Yeah, we seen a few, not many round here have 'em though. I know GOK has one, a couple folk that passed through also had them. Never did say where they got 'em though." I shrugged. "Probably picked them up at the bazaar." When I got blank looks, I added, "Big magical building that leads to a multidimensional flea market." Hey," was all Martin said. "Any idea where we could find this bazaar?" I had to shrug again. "Not around here, I originally came from Chicago. There was one there and another a few days north of that one. They seem to spawn randomly but usually around major urban areas." Biloxi might have one then," Joshua said. I hopped on the back seat of the quad, glad it had side handles. It would be a little weird for me to hug the torso of a man I just met. "We can talk about it when we return, should get moving. Sandworms could be here anytime." I hoped Fiona could keep up. We crossed dunes at a staggering speed, these vehicles easily tearing through the sand with their paddle tires. "So, Paul, what did you do before?" I barely heard Martin over the rushing wind. I said, not really wanting to drag up my past shitty job. "Oh, that's cool. Had a brother that did that in Biloxi." "What did you do?" I asked, expecting the normal small talk. "I helped the cartel run drugs." "Well, most of the town did really. Don't worry though, kind of hard to run drugs across the ocean when you got no ocean," the man added, chuckling. "Seems like a dangerous profession," I added warily. It was, but we weren't really given a choice. Cartel thugs took over the town years ago. The system was the best thing to happen to us since. The thugs went crazy when it hit, but we knew it was a sign. The city banded together and we took care of the problem once and for all. Good people died to see it happen, may they rest in eternal peace. Anyway, now we patrol to keep the area safe from monsters and roaming gangs. "Shitty people everywhere," I mumbled. The man had good hearing. That there are. The trip was just as rough as the man said. I held a death grip on the handles as we crested dunes fast enough to be airborne. The man had no issue keeping the vehicle under control, perks of the system. I heard Clem shout, "On our right." I looked over and saw the telltale sign of a sand devourer. It looked like it was trying to cut us off. "Hold on tight, looks like we're going to cross paths with the worm." 30 seconds later a funnel started to form in front of us. Martin gunned it as we flew over the forming pit. I looked back and saw Joshua drop an item into the hole as he veered around it. A few seconds later a boom resounded followed by a spray of sand. The monster shrieked and sped off in another direction. That should keep him off us. Why not kill it? Ha, things are tougher than all get out. When they are injured they also like to burn the area, hot enough to turn sand to glass. No thanks, I'll stick with tossing some C4 into their gullets from time to time. Couldn't argue with that. I doubt they had abilities like me. I already knew they didn't have my level. I doubt I would have been able to kill the one I fought without Fiona helping me. The rest of the trip went by quickly and quietly. The dunes started to become smaller, eventually, transitioning into swampy soil. The quads had no issues operating in this stuff either, but they didn't have to for long. After about a mile we exited onto drier ground and followed a road up to a shed. We gotta park the quads here, paddle tires don't work so well on hard dirt. I nodded and stepped off of the machine. I was stiff from the ride but happy to not have to traverse the rest of the desert and swamp on foot. Thanks for the lift. No problem, we needed to head to town anyway. I can introduce you to the constable. She will be happy to show you around our community. From my point of view, these people were way too trusting, but if they had a whole town backing them up there was little any single person could do to them. I decided to walk with the three men, it helped work the soreness out of my limbs. It was another 3 or 4 miles before the town came into view. A wall made of old vehicles, building supplies, and sections of raised dirt and stone surrounded the place. A makeshift gate had been placed along the road. I could see people walking along the top, no guns in sight. That was a good thing in my mind. I did see a few bows though. Martin waved to the people on top of the gate, a few waved back, the others just kept an eye on me. We passed through the open gate and Martin walked up to a guard sitting at a table, on the ground level. Any idea where Sally is? You should really use her title, the man grumbled. Martin barked a laugh, she's my sis, I'll call her what I want. Fine, and when she kicks your ass, I'll make sure to let Louise know not to heal you. She's probably at Hannigan's. Thanks, Roger, Martin said, waving as we walked down the street. The town was quaint. It was definitely old school South. The houses were large and ornate, everything was high off the ground, stairs leading to entrances. A remnant of their pre-system location being below sea level. As we got closer to downtown, the buildings got smaller and closer together. Eventually, they were wall to wall, none of the buildings rising over 3 stories tall. It reminded me a lot of where I grew up in the north. Small town Americana at its finest. Eventually, we stopped outside what looked like a bar. The sign read Hannigan's. Here we are, Martin said enthusiastically. The group pushed through the door into the bar, the inside was clean and quiet. A few candles lit the space, providing just enough light to drive the gloom away. The building wasn't designed for natural light to filter in, hence the candles. A woman was behind the bar cleaning some glasses. Martin walked up to her. How's it going, sis? Oh, I brought a new arrival to meet you. I could see the woman tense up when he called her sis. She placed the glass back on the table and glared at Martin. How many times do I have to tell you, call me Constable or Miss Jennings? Martin rolled his eyes. Yet. Anyway, this is Paul. Found him wandering around the desert. The woman turned her gaze towards me, looking me up and down. I figured if she was going to give me the 3rd degree I might as well do the same, activating Identify. Sally Jennings, Free Home Constable level 10. She had a respectable level for someone in the ass end of nowhere. I was curious about her class but chose not to inquire. If she didn't know I had Identify I wasn't going to freely divulge the information at this time. After she took my measure she smiled, it seemed forced and didn't reach her eyes. Nice to meet you, Paul, sticking around or just passing through? Not sure yet, it really depends on what I find in the area. Well, we are more than glad to have you stay if you chose to, always good to have another fighter to keep the monsters at bay. I don't ever recall saying I was one. She laughed, it's easy enough to see by the way you hold yourself and the way your eyes quickly scan a room. Fair enough, I replied. For now I could just use a room and food. My brother can lead you to the hotel. Gates are locked at dusk. If you leave town don't expect them to open again until morning. I nodded in acknowledgement before Martin led me back out and towards the hotel. Your sister isn't overly friendly, I stated blandly. She just needs to get to know you a bit before she warms up to you. Too many issues with outsiders pre-system, left her a bit apprehensive of new faces. Just stay out of trouble and you'll be fine. I nodded as we walked. Here we are, Case to Armen, Martin said, arm extended to present the hotel. The building was a 3-story brick construction with large stone columns that ran all the way up and through the wraparound walkway. Thanks, I think I can take it from here. Sounds good. Oh, forgot to mention, rooms are 10 credits a night. I guess I should have asked if you had the credits before leading you here, I'm sorry. That's fine, Martin, I have the credits. Excellent. Hey, if you're interested, I may have a job for you in the morning. I will meet you in the lobby in the morning to discuss it further. Before I could deny or accept the offer, the man was gone, running off down the street. I just groaned. Excitable fellow, I heard Fiona say quietly. She was still invisible and I chose not to respond as I walked into the hotel to get a room and some food. Chapter 60, New Acquaintances. I found the food to be decent. The hotel was interesting. Unlike the bar, you could tell the building was old. Built pre-electricity, it had fireplaces in the common room and dining hall. The food tasted like it was cooked over an open fire, which was almost a guarantee as I didn't see or hear any mono-power sources. The bedrooms had large windows that could open and wooden slatted shutters that could control the airflow. Which was good considering the muggy heat of the swamp. Retrofitted ceiling fans hung from the ceiling, completely useless without electricity. An oil lamp was set on the table next to a bed that sported a mosquito net. I plopped into the bed as Fiona became visible again. An interesting place, it seems more closely related to buildings in my world than the ones I have seen of yours. Yet, this place is old, probably built 200 years ago or more. So, do you plan on helping Martin with his task? Depends on what he wants. If it isn't too arduous, I don't see why not. Just, so long as I don't get too involved with local politics. I've had enough of other people's problems for the time being. I wasn't being totally honest with Fiona, I also didn't want to get to know these people. I have lost enough peers lately. Each loss was hard on me, even if I didn't let it show anymore. The latest loss had been one of the harder ones since Fiona. Moana and Sheila were good people. They had risked everything to set a bunch of people free, more than I ever did, that was for sure. I still regretted the fact that I couldn't do anything to save them. Abida was a monstrous man. Then there was poor Jamal. If Abida had shown up on the roof, that meant Jamal had been taken care of. I still felt bad for having to use the man in that fashion. There was just no other choice with the time I had left. It was just another failure I had to live with, another ghost to haunt my dreams. Like I needed any more of those. Maybe once I finished assisting Martin with whatever he wanted, I could search the area for a dungeon. That might allow me to cut loose and vent this frustration I had. Another thing I needed to do was visit Biloxi and see if it had a bazaar there. Maybe I would get lucky and it was linked to the one up north. At the very least I could acquire a message item to send Frotsar. There must be items that didn't need to be linked to send correspondence to people. Plus I needed new weapons, along with a visit to a blacksmith to see if my armor could be salvaged. I'm going to wander around town, I'll be back before morning. Sounds good. Stay out of trouble, I said, rolling over and closing my eyes. Fiona turned invisible as she floated through the closed door. She still found the sensation odd. She floated through the town, with no particular goal in mind. People walked about oblivious to her presence. Eventually, she was drawn to a graveyard. It was odd, everything was stored above ground. She would ask Paul about this later, maybe he knew why. As she floated through the graveyard, the pull intensified. It wasn't a pull on her body, but more on her mind, calling her to come forward. She was curious to see what it was, but her sword appeared in her ghostly hand just in case. Once closer she saw a young woman, sitting outside a spell circle that held a single lit candle. The woman's eyes were pure white and she was chanting some words to a ritual. When the woman finished a verse, the pulse of power that drew her here rippled out again. She was able to resist the pull, but she could see wisps of ethereal light starting to be dragged into the spell circle. After a while the wisps materialized into a man. "Why have you summoned me, caller?" the ghostly voice spoke. The whiteness faded in the woman's eyes as she looked at the man. "I seek to grow stronger and need information. And what do I get in return? I could release you from this bound existence." The ghost seemed to ponder that for a bit. It happened to glance up and spotted Fiona. The creature's eyes went wide before it screamed an unholy scream. "Betrayal, why have you summoned a spectral guardian?" Before the woman could even comprehend what was going on, the form of the ghost evaporated, leaving the woman in shocked silence. She looked around frantically in the direction the ghost had been staring but saw nothing. Fiona was still invisible. When the woman's eyes started to turn white again, Fiona fled. Monique was flabbergasted at the turn of events. She had been calling ghosts for months without an issue. She could only ever ask one question of them though, turning it into a slow process. When she activated her sight ability, she spotted the remnants of an armed and armored woman. The sight sent a shiver down her spine. Most ghosts only showed up as indistinct blobs of glowing light, at least until they were within her spell form. This was something altogether different, and much stronger. She gulped. She hoped she hadn't accidentally lured a vengeful spirit into the town. She would need to let her gran know about this. Perhaps she could help capture or rid the town of this creature. I awoke, feeling rested. It felt like I hadn't gotten a decent sleep in months. Which was mostly true. Fiona was floating in the corner, looking out the window. Morning. She turned towards me and smiled. I see your body has only grown more taut. I looked down, realizing I had removed my clothes sometime in the night. She was right though, my body was slim and wiry, a six-pack prominent on my abdomen. Stare all you want, I'm not ashamed, I added, winking to the ghostly woman. She just rolled her eyes and turned back towards the window. I heard her whisper something. If only I still had a body. I smiled at her comment. I got dressed, leaving off my armor for now. It left me feeling vulnerable, but I needed to at least try and trust people again. Not that I didn't already have all my buffs activated. I walked down to have breakfast. Eggs with some sort of biscuits and gravy. I was enjoying the food when Martin arrived. He waved when he saw me and headed towards the table. Hey, Paul, glad you're awake. Got some time to discuss my proposal? I nodded and motioned for the man to sit, not wanting to talk with a mouth full of food. Good, good. So as you know, my team and I patrol around the city and eliminate threats. Well, we got a group of creatures called prowlers running about. Nasty creatures about the size of a boar, but with more feline features. Anyway, they attack the livestock. We only manage to chase them off, the creatures disappearing into the swamp before we can catch them. Okay, but how do I fit into this? The creatures are rather smart. We have tried to cut them off, using one man to block their escape. Somehow, they can tell. They scatter and we are unable to chase them. We think they have learned that there are only 3 of us. If we added a 4th, perhaps the plan would work. Seems dangerous for me. It shouldn't be, we haven't seen them ever attack people. Although, I can't rule it out. If you help us, we can escort you to Biloxi. This really seemed like a win-win for them, and not much advantage for me other than the approval of Martin and the town. I mulled it over for a bit before agreeing to his terms. Great, whenever you are ready just head to where we parked the quads. I nodded as he left. I took my time to eat the meal. Other than the previous night, it had been some time since I had good food. The food the slaves were fed was edible, and that was about it. I still remembered the times Charla made me watch her eat a gourmet meal. I would have to stand there and watch her eat. She would smile between bites, stopping to describe the taste and texture. When she finished, she would always leave a large portion uneaten. This was usually after I wasn't allowed to eat for some perceived infraction or another. My stomach would rumble uncomfortably as I was forced to stand there. When she returned, she would always dump the remains in the trash with a wicked grin. Shaking my head, I pushed those thoughts away. The woman was dead and I could take my time to enjoy the food without worry. After I cleaned the plate, I left the hotel and started walking down the street. Fiona was quiet as she floated invisibly beside me. At least I assumed she was beside me. The thought of her not being here made me slightly nervous. I whispered, Fiona, you here? Yes, I'm here, she said softly in return. That little confirmation made me feel immeasurably better. I wasn't afraid of the townsfolk, or a fight, no, I was afraid of being alone again. Her presence had a calming effect on me. If she wasn't here, there was a real possibility I might lash out. I continued walking towards the building we stopped at yesterday. I could have used Bella since it was a few miles, but the exercise felt good. The walk took me about an hour. I wasn't in any hurry. Martin waved as he saw me walking towards them. Paul, glad you could make it so soon. I nodded to the man, knowing I had taken my sweet time. I was beginning to suspect the guy was just really accommodating. I decided to cut any small talk. Yeah, so where do I need to head to? Right, sorry, we can take you over there. The prowlers probably aren't around now, but we will set up and wait. They usually attack around dusk. I nodded and got on his vehicle again. I would use Bella only when I knew where I needed to be. The ride took quite some time as we had to go through the entire town and another 5 or so miles outside town. Luckily they had changed out the tires on the quads for something more practical on dirt. A lone house was surrounded by a 6-foot metal fence. It made sense to me why the house was still occupied so far outside a city. Someone that looked to be in their 40s opened the front gate as we approached. I spotted a cavalry sword strapped to his hip. We rode past so quickly I didn't get a chance to use identity on the man. We kept driving until we got to another gate on the far side of the house. This time Clem got off of his vehicle and opened the gate. Beyond this gate is the grazing area. The fence was electrified to keep the cows contained, and they still stay clear of it even though there is no power. Unfortunately, the other beasts aren't afraid of a few wires. Why not fix something up as you did with the quads? We tried, not enough juice to electrify the whole property. Sounds like you folk need to purchase a mana engine. Martin turned to look at me. What's that? Works like a normal engine, except instead of burning fuel to produce the power it uses mana. How do you provide mana for it? Not really sure, I saw a few in vehicles but I wasn't that impressed. I also know a few buildings in Chicago had them. It was enough juice to power a few floors and an elevator. What they used to power them I can't say. Do you think this bazaar of yours would have them? I had to smile at that. Trust me, they will. You have to see it to understand. Might have to go there after we deal with our pest problem. The quads made their way slowly along the fence line. Eventually, stopping. You see that cluster of trees over yonder? I looked to where Martin was pointing and saw a small grove of trees, just outside the fence. Yes, is that where they usually run off to? Yup, if you can set up in there we might be able to catch a few of the creatures. Sounds good, I can take it from here. Stay safe, Paul, if it feels too dangerous just let them go, we can try something else. I almost snorted at this, instead, I nodded. We will set up near the gate and wait for dusk. Once you hear a commotion head for the copse of trees. We will try to drive the creatures into them. After that they turned around and headed back towards the gate, leaving me alone. I waited until they were quite a ways off before I spoke. Well, what do you think? Seems easy enough, Fiona replied. You don't think it's a trap? Doubtful, if it was it's the most convoluted trap ever. I would have to agree, keep vigilant just in case. Fiona nodded and I climbed through the unpowered fence. There was no point getting closer to the trees and possibly spooking the creatures. I could get there quickly with Bella. I sat in the long grass and waited. Hours seemed to pass as I waited. Eventually, I pulled out a book and started to read. This book was a book on medieval armor design. Not the most engaging of reads, but it did point out a few reasons some designs were used over others. My reading was interrupted as Fiona appeared. She had been floating high overhead to watch for the creatures. The prowlers have passed the fence line. I counted 10. I stood up, storing my book and releasing Bella. Any idea of their level or capabilities? Fiona just shook her head. They are quick and about the size of a large dog. I nodded as I mounted Bella, giving her feathers a gentle stroke to calm her. She was angry at me again for keeping her boxed up. Maybe I would leave her out for now. We made it to the trees quickly. I dismounted. Bella could fight on her own. Fiona would also be fighting. I didn't fear getting overwhelmed by these creatures. They were small enough that my Eye of the Storm could deal with them. No, we just wanted to make sure we got them all. We didn't have long to wait. The sound of engines followed by screeching filled the air. I imbued my staff with water and earth. As soon as the creatures crossed the fence line I struck. Disruption tore through the few trees in front of me before slamming into 5 of the creatures. Massive chunks of rock and dirt were thrown into the air along with compressed jets of water. I had just enough time to use Identify before the creatures were torn to pieces by my spell. Prowler level 5. The creatures were mottled black with scales and feathers. They reminded me of cats, the way they ran, but that was where the resemblance ended. Their heads sported 4 black eyes and a wide mouth full of teeth. Bella raced off to chase the 2 on her side. She caught the first one in her powerful jaws, quickly tearing it apart while she leaped after the next one. She managed to pin it under one of her taloned feet. The creature mewled in pain as it tried to bite at her. Fiona had killed hers off with 3 strikes. The now headless bodies pumped blood into the forest floor. She faded away before the others arrived. The quads pulled up a few seconds later, on the opposite side of the fence. I walked out of the wood line to greet them. I saw them begin to wave before horrified expressions reached their faces. They were screaming at me to turn around. I did, only to see Bella standing there, blood dripping from her face. Oh right, I forgot to tell them about her. No need to worry, she's my mount, I stated while rubbing Bella's feathers. She gave a purr like a cat and rubbed her head against me. I did notice she kept her eyes on the other three though. Martin walked up slowly. That is one terrifying creature, and you said you ride it. Yeah, it's a trained war mount I got from the bazaar. The man's eyes lit up at that. Can I pet her? I would advise against that, she tends to snap at people. Martin pulled his arm back before chuckling, well, good to know. He looked at the devastation I had caused. I hate to even ask looking at this mess, but did you get them all? All 10, although you will likely only find the remains of 3. My spell was a little more effective than I thought and Bella was hungry. Bella is your mount? Yep. Can I ask, where did she even come from? I showed him how the storage item worked, explaining that you could store food and water for the creature inside. Well, this job went way easier and faster than we had planned. Care to take a trip with us to Biloxi and this bazaar? I agreed to go with them and show them around. We left the ranch and headed out of town.